Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Chris Cuomo was wrong, and he admits it. And I wish I could say I could take more joy in him saying that, because I was pretty upset with him, especially during the pandemic, because I thought that sometimes he behaved just terribly as a human being during the lockdowns when we were going through the whole issue of mandatory vaccinations. I didn't like the things that he was saying. I didn't like that stupid video he made with his brother, then the governor, where they had the big nasal swab thing, like the giant Q-tip, and they were joking. I didn't like it. And I didn't like the way he was swearing at that guy who caught the bodybuilder newsman out and about when he wasn't supposed to be out and about during restrictions. Anyway, but he's admitted he's wrong. Was wrong about a lot of stuff. He didn't say exactly what he was wrong about, so I'm just going to go with he was wrong about everything, and yet I'm starting to like him because he admits that he's wrong. I'll show you later in the broadcast. We're also going to touch on tonight's top news stories, and then we are going to recue lawyer Glen Bogue, and a debate. We're going to have the great Canada debate with Glen Bogue again, because some people have been asking about that. And so I'm going to recue that and run it for you because it's worth it. And I think we need to review all of that. So it's the great Canada debate, and beyond that as well, because it gets into the whole thing about common law and whether Canada is a real country or just a corporation and all of those things. And I think if you don't remember the last time I talked to Glen Bogue, or maybe you do, but this is going to be good for you, good for me, good for the country. We have a lot of stuff to unpack tonight, not the least of which is all this talk about tariffs, the deadline tomorrow, sort of a deadline between Canada and the U.S. It doesn't sound like it's going that great. Canada not negotiating in public, but on the U.S. side, you've got some big mouths doing this tonight, setting the stage for some sort of it feels like a confrontation. And I get the feeling that the United States has not really been negotiating in good faith. That's my take on it. But that in itself may just be a negotiating tactic. The real bottom line is I think we have to wait until tomorrow to find out really where we're at, because Trump has this habit of just having his team come in with a last minute deal in very dramatic fashion. So we shall see, won't we? Yes, we will. But I'm not optimistic. So we're going to get into that tonight. And also we're going to touch on the whole Epstein files thing again tonight. We also have a brand new song related to that from Maverick and the News Brothers. So stay with me. We have a lot of ground to cover this evening, and I'm glad you're here so I can share it all with you. I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Let's start digging into what's going on tonight. In the world of news, tensions are high as the clock ticks down on trade talks between Canada and the US of A. This August 1st deadline is looming. Prime Minister Mark Carney says negotiations with the US are in intense phase, his words. But a deal remains uncertain. President Donald Trump has threatened to impose a 35% tariff on Canadian goods not covered by the USMCA agreement, alongside existing 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum and a new 50% levy on copper products. Carney is insisting Canada will only accept a deal that serves its interests, our interests, emphasizing Canada's economic ties with the U.S., where 75% of Canadian exports are sent for the moment. Although I am aware that there are deals being struck and have been struck already with other countries, including Mexico, and Canada continues to work on enhancing trade with the European Union as well. The recent decision to scrap a digital services tax on U.S. tech firms briefly revived talks, but Trump's frustration over Canada's support for Palestinian statehood has added, well, a new wrinkle to the whole thing tonight. Here we go. Let's pick up a few of these clips. We've got sound bites. And Trump is saying that, well, they didn't even take time, I guess, today to speak to Canada. He says it's all a wait and see thing. And he's not happy about Mark Carney stating that Canada will soon recognize Palestine as an independent state. But is it a deal breaker? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. Over here, he says no.
Canada moves forward with recognizing the Palestinian state. Is that a deal breaker?
Well, we're going to see. No, I didn't like what they said, but, that's their opinion. I didn't like that. Not a deal breaker, but we haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called, and we'll see. But we have made a few deals today that are excellent deals for the country. Yeah. Do you have a...
Canada currently. What's the holdup with the negotiations with Canada?
Well, they have to pay a fair rate. It's all. It's very simple. They have been charging very, very high tariffs to our farmers, some over 200%. And they've been treating our farmers very badly. They've been treating our country very badly for years. And look, we like Canada. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada. Yeah. But they've been very poorly led. They've been very, very poorly led. And all we want is fairness for our country. That's all. You know, they want to be under the, as we call it, the Golden Dome. And I said, well, you're going to have to pay for that. They want a lot of things from our country, and for years we did it. We basically protect them with our military. They spend very little money on their military, as you know, not an acceptable amount of money.
Right. Okay. So, negotiations continue in Washington. Canadian officials bracing for what's going to come of all this. Here's Doug Ford, Ontario Premier, tonight with his reaction to the current state of affairs.
You know what's a problem with President Trump? And, we're united. First of all, I've never seen this country more united, ever, in all my years of being in politics, and it's a great feeling, all provinces, territories, municipalities, and the federal government. But, Prime Minister Carney's trying his best, but this guy will say something one day, and he'll wake up, and the cheese slips off the cracker, and then all of a sudden he goes the other way. And you're thinking, how do you deal with a guy like this? Are we hoping that we can get a deal with zero tariffs? Yes. But I always say how we can kick back, and it's not the American people, kick back at President Trump, is let's start onshoring everything. Absolutely everything we possibly can. Like I-beams, those big steel I-beams. I didn't realize we don't make them here until found out during the trade deal. Or the rails that are beautiful, our cars are going to be made, sorry, the street cars are going to be made down the street. We don't make the rails, so we need to start making rails and start making sure that we make those steel I-beams and aluminum cans. Aluminum cans are my favorite. The Coke, the Pepsis, all the other beverages, the Molsons, the Labatt's, the craft brewers. We're the kings of aluminum in Quebec. They ship the aluminum down, 25% tariff. They get printed and formed, 25% back tariffs. So my question was, why aren't we making aluminum cans here? Now we're going to be making aluminum cans. They're going to lose $1 billion worth of business in the U.S. And same with tin cans from Dofasco. Ship it down to the U.S. They get formed. I had a meeting with the big users of the tins. Now we're bringing a line up here. And they're going to be losing out on about 1.3 billion cans just on the tin cans. But we can build anything here. We're an economic powerhouse. You know, folks, we don't have to take a back seat to anyone in the world, and we sure the heck don't have to take a back seat to President Trump. He needs to remember, yes, they're our number one customer, but we're their number one customer. You hear about all these deals he's making, and they're good countries, Japan and Korea. But I'll give you an example. With Japan, he said he made this beautiful deal and everything, and God bless him. But they buy $79 billion worth of products, U.S., off of the U.S. Canada buys $359 billion U.S. off the folks south of the border. 9 million Americans wake up every single morning to produce a widget or a good just for Ontario alone. Those 9 million jobs are in jeopardy right now. We buy more products off the U.S. than Japan, Korea, China, the UK, and France combined. So I wouldn't roll over, and I've told the Prime Minister, do not roll over, hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can.
Yep.
And that's what we need to do. And we can do it. We can build anything here in Canada, absolutely anything. From the beautiful trains that we build here, to the planes, to automobiles, to satellites, to jet engines, and the list could go on and on and on. And our strength are the people. We have the brightest people anywhere in the world right here in Ontario.
Spank them. Hard. Were you ever in Quebec? Stowing tin cans on the deck and aluminum. Where the king with a golden crown was riding on a donkey. We're going to get into some of that later with Glen Bogue. What are you talking about, Rick? Do you not remember that song, folks? You got to learn just your history, but your Canadian culture. Yeah. All right. We've got other stuff going on. Just fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. I bet there's no deal tomorrow, and things will get a little bit heated, and we'll see where it goes. I think in the end, it'll be taco time because we're stronger than anybody realizes, and we hold lots of cards. So fear not, Canuckistanians. Mr. Trump, you're not as powerful as you think you are. In addition to all that going on, Trump sent shockwaves through global markets today with the announcement of a 50%, well, yesterday actually, that 50% tariff on imported copper products. It's not just Canada, man. He's going after other countries too. This affects all kinds of other industries within the U.S. It's adding to inflation in the U.S., which we're just beginning to see, and that will become more pronounced over time. Chile, Peru, other major copper exporters, all seeing, waves going through their industries and their economies. In addition to all that, the federal appeals court in Washington, D.C. today cast a spotlight on President Trump's sweeping tariff policies. An 11-judge panel heard nearly 2 hours of heated arguments over their legality. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit is examining whether Trump overstepped his authority by using the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose broad tariffs on dozens of countries, including a 25% duty on Canada and Mexico and a 10% universal tariff on most U.S. trading partners. These measures, part of Trump's Liberation Day plan, announced in April, are set to escalate tomorrow, August 1st, with threats of this 35% tariff on Canadian goods still not covered by the USMCA. That, keep in mind, that's only goods not covered by the USMCA, so that's not everything. Judges expressed sharp skepticism about Trump's use of this law, which historically has been used for sanctions, not tariffs. You see, he's trying to go to war with us. In fact, he has. He's using the only weapon that he has been using, aside from those big bombs that he dropped on Iran. But other than that, tariffs are his weapon, because tariffs are a form of sort of sanction, but it's also a way of taxing his own people. It's not really sound economic policy. So with regard to this law, Judge Jimmy Reyna noted that, quote, it doesn't even mention the word tariffs, that law, and yet he's using that law to justify the use of tariffs as an economic and political tool internationally. Justice Department lawyer Brett Shumate defended the tariffs, arguing that the U.S. trade deficit, which he claimed impacts military readiness, constitutes a national emergency. Well, depends on how you look at it. In May, the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that Trump's use of the law was illegal, temporarily blocking the tariffs, but the appeals court issued a stay, which means a delay, allowing them to continue pending today's hearing. Small businesses and 12 Democratic-led states, plaintiffs in the case, warned that the tariffs threaten supply chains, raise consumer prices, and risk company closures. All going back to what Doug Ford just had to say about all this. Canada, for instance, is, a massive trading partner. You start kicking Canada where it counts, and you're going to get it back, just inadvertently, not even through anything that Canada does. You're doing it to yourself. Jeffrey Schwab of the Liberty Justice Center says the duties cause, in his words, irreparable harm, his words, to businesses. With the case likely headed to the Supreme Court, Trump took to Truth Social today, calling it America's big case, and warned that without tariffs, the U.S. would be dead with no chance of survival. And so the August 1st deadline looms, just hours away, really. And the outcome could reshape global trade and Trump's economic agenda. So it's speaking of Truth Social. Trump once again put the pharmaceutical industry in the spotlight, posting 17 identical letters on Truth Social today. I will show you right here. First of all, as we do this Truth Social scroll, first up, his comment on Canada. He says, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada, triple exclamation point. Well, okay. But you're just really proving the point of the court that this is really not about economics. I don't know if you're proving the point of the court necessarily, but this just shows that he's actually at war with Canada. This isn't just an economic thing. This is a political thing. He's trying to invoke U.S. influence over Canadian foreign policy using tariffs. And not just foreign policy. He just doesn't like the Liberal government, doesn't like Canada, doesn't like liberalism. And even if it was a conservative government, make no mistake, the Conservative Party of Canada is very much in the same vein, in his view. Not a populist party, the Conservative Party of Canada. There are populists within it, But no, even if it was Pierre Poilievre negotiating, it wouldn't be much, if any, better, because Canada, even under the CPC, would still be a liberal democracy, not a republic like the United States, where unitary executive power has now taken a dominant position within the hierarchy of the governmental system, giving unprecedented powers, even within U.S. history, to the man in the White House with the Sharpie, ruling with the stroke of a Sharpie, which is why he's in court over the tariffs, because he's gone to war around the world with every government, you check it, with every government that is a liberal democracy. If they are on the road to a more authoritarian style of governance, and not conservative, no, authoritarian, then he is being much more favorable to them. Or if the country in question is very powerful and would present something of a threat to the United States, he goes a little easier on them. Like, say, Russia. It's a multifaceted approach. It's like, do I like their policies, their politics? If I don't, I'm going to hammer them. If they're a liberal democracy. Second, are they a potential threat to us? Do they have nukes? And are they pointing them at us? Now, if they're a friend and an ally, then I'll just kick them where it counts until I get what I want, especially if they're on, the labor side, say in the UK, or if they're more freedom and democracy oriented. If they're more authoritarian, well, that's okay. I know a lot of people don't understand. It's liberal. When I'm using that phrase liberal, I don't mean like liberal party. I'm talking about liberal democracies, which is what all of Western society, all Western countries, based on liberal democracies. They're all liberal democracies since World War II. That's what our country has been. That's what the United States has largely been, with a slightly different system, being a republic, not a parliamentary democracy. Anyway, let's just move on. I'm tired of talking about it. Let's just wait until tomorrow. We'll know more then. And don't lose any sleep over it. It's going to be okay. I don't know how, but it's going to be okay. We're not alone. Not by a long shot. Okay. So what else do we have here tonight? The family of Virginia Giuffre, the prominent accuser of the late Jeffrey Epstein, has issued a powerful statement expressing shock and demanding answers after President Donald Trump's recent comments about their late sister. On Tuesday aboard Air Force One, Trump claimed Epstein stole Giuffre and other young women from his Mar-a-Lago resort's spa in the early 2000s. We played the clip for you the other night, and that led, Trump says, to their falling out. Giuffre, who died by suicide in April at the age of 41, fueling a lot of conspiracy theories, alleged she was recruited by Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, at 16 years of age while working as a locker room attendant at Mar-a-Lago in 2000, initiating years of sexual abuse and trafficking. Giuffre's siblings, Sky and Amanda Roberts, and Danny and Lynette Wilson, released a statement to The Atlantic saying it was, in their words, this is their words, it was shocking to hear President Trump invoke our sister and say that he was aware that Virginia had been stolen from Mar-a-Lago. It makes us ask if he was aware of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal actions, especially given his statement 2 years later that his good friend Jeffrey likes women on the younger side. The family's still reeling from Giuffre's death, is now demanding the release of all Epstein-related files held by the Justice Department, echoing calls from survivors and even some of Trump's supporters for transparency. Trump's remarks confirmed Thursday, today, when he said he didn't like Epstein taking staff and barred him from Mar-a-Lago, have raised questions about what he knew and when he might have known it. The White House has faced mounting pressure over its refusal to unseal Epstein records, despite Trump's 2024 campaign promise to do so. Giuffre's family also condemned Maxwell, currently serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking, calling her a monster and opposing her recent bid for immunity to testify before Congress. So as this story unfolds, the Giuffre family's call for answers underscores the ongoing pain of Epstein's victims and the public's demand for clarity. We'll keep you posted. And I should go back and just show you these letters now on Truth Social about the pharmaceutical stuff. Here they are. There's a whole series of these letters. Let me just pivot back to this for a moment. So yeah, he's put the pharmaceutical industry, Trump, in the spotlight tonight, posting 17 of these letters on Truth Social, addressed to the CEOs of major drug companies like Pfizer, Eli Lilly, and Novartis. The letters sparked a firestorm of debate and demand action on Trump's most favored nation drug pricing policy. But what exactly does it all mean and why now? Well, let's break it down for you. Back on May 12th, Trump signed an executive order aimed at slashing U.S. prescription drug prices by tying them to the lowest prices paid by other developed countries, a policy he calls most favored nation pricing. The idea is simple but contentious. If a drug costs, say, $10 here in Canada, but $100 in the U.S., Americans should pay no more than $10. Trump argues this would end what he calls global freeloading, where U.S. consumers subsidize cheaper drugs abroad. He claims prices could drop by 30 to 80%, saving Americans billions of dollars, given that the U.S. spends over $400 billion annually on prescriptions, often triple what other nations pay for the same drugs. Today's letters ramp up the pressure, addressed to 17 big pharma CEOs. They demand 4 specific actions within 60 days. Extend most favored nation pricing to Medicaid patients, guarantee it for all new drugs, repatriate higher revenues from foreign sales to lower U.S. prices, and allow Americans to buy drugs directly from manufacturers at these lower rates, bypassing middlemen like pharmacy benefit managers. Trump personalized some letters, handwriting first names like David for Eli Lilly's CEO David Ricks, and warned if the companies don't comply, his administration, led by Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. and CMS Administrator Dr. Oz, will deploy every tool in our arsenal, said Trump, to enforce these changes. The pharmaceutical industry is pushing back. Groups like Pharma, or PHRMA, call the policy deeply flawed, arguing it could cripple innovation, disrupt biotech jobs, and give foreign governments too much control over U.S. drug prices. A similar Trump policy in 2020 was blocked by a federal court for lacking proper rulemaking, and experts warn today's demands could face legal challenges, with rule changes taking months or years. Meanwhile, some praise the move. Billionaire Mark Cuban called it a potential game changer in May. As the September 29th deadline looms, the battle over drug pricing or drug prices is heating up, with American patients caught in the middle. And it's a complex issue because it is not as simple as simply making sure that Americans pay the lowest prices. The reason that these prices are adjusted the way they are for different countries is because they are adjusted based on market conditions in each of the countries to make sure that people in those countries can afford to purchase the drugs. And so even though patients or people in the United States do pay higher prices, it is because of the economic conditions there. And the reason they adjust the pricing in other countries is because then the drugs can be still purchased in other countries, improving health outcomes, reducing the spread of disease, which ultimately, if those diseases spread more efficiently, they can come back to haunt the United States in ways that I don't think Mr. Trump is considering. In addition to that, more of the pharmaceuticals can be produced to achieve greater economies of scale, allowing for much wider distribution and better production efficiencies globally, reducing overall costs. However, if the United States forces this issue, you're going to see a big change in the distribution of these pharmaceuticals. A lot of countries and a lot of people in, especially developing nations, may not have access to these drugs, because ultimately what the pharmaceutical companies would do is it's not going to work out the way Trump is making you think that it will work out. He's not telling you the whole story. What will end up happening is, in order to preserve price integrity in the United States, where they're charging a higher price, they just won't sell the drugs in those developing countries anymore at the lower prices. That means you're still going to pay a higher price in the United States. Some other countries like Canada may end up paying more, but largely a lot of countries will just be cut off. That means that you're going to have an increase in illnesses. You'll have more rapid distribution or transmission of diseases, and the drug companies will continue to make the amount of money that they feel that they need to make, and that will keep profits where they need to be in the view of the companies, and continue to be used to reinvest in other innovation. So it's not going to be as simple as just reducing prices for U.S. consumers. It's much more complex than that, because it isn't just a regular kind of consumable or retail kind of product. It's pharmaceuticals, it's healthcare, and there are social issues surrounding it that Trump's economic policy here does not really address. Again, fasten your seatbelt. We shall see. I don't think it's going to be quite the outcome that people are expecting. Here's Howard Lutnick. There's something about this guy. I will keep my comments with regard to Mr. Lutnick to myself tonight. Maybe another night. Okay, here he is. Whatever. It's self-explanatory. Why isn't it running?
But Canada, I take it, not so much, or not so good.
Well, imagine, like, the president truthed out that the Canadians put out, oh, we're going to recognize the Palestinian state. I mean, come on, don't be so tone deaf, right? The president is totally into trying to get peace in Gaza, and you're throwing your hat in the ring from Canada? Come on. You know, they still haven't solved dairy. They still have 2 countries on the whole world retaliated against the United States of America tariffs. China, which we all know, and Canada. So, you know what? I just don't see the president stepping off the gas. Now, Mark Carney came down, had a really nice lunch with the president when he first got elected. You know, if he makes that call, and if he starts turning on the charm, and if he takes off his retaliation, and stops the silliness, maybe the president will let it down a bit. But right now, 35%, that letter he sent, is surely in the cards.
And if
Whatever. Somebody's got to lead. It ain't you. It's not Trump. It's certainly not Lutnick. Somebody has to step up and provide some leadership on the world stage. Might as well be Canada. And yeah, sorry, man, but your economic policies, your sanctions, whatever you think you're going to use as a sledgehammer against us in order to make us bend to your will, I'm not in. But, this whole thing ain't over yet. There's a lot more to uncover, especially with those Epstein files, That's kind of what I'm thinking about tonight. And that's why, as we prepare to bring in Glen Bogue this evening, recuing him with our great Canada debate, let's transition over to that with this new song from Maverick and the News Brothers. This pays tribute to the current situation with the Epstein files. This is called Oops. Nothing to see here.
can't release the names to protect the victims. And also Donald Trump. Coincidence? Just dumb luck. Right? Another sealed file. That crocodile smile. We did our best, says the DOJ, while the truth just fades away. Another new spin. No one will win except the rich guys with gold ID cards and closets full of secrets behind steel bars. Just a little glitch. A billionaire's privilege. That's the sound of the case. Closed.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
Okay, let's bring our guest in. There he is. Glen Bogue, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing very well. I'm very anxious for this interview.
Yeah, well, happy Thanksgiving, first of all. I don't know if I don't know if we even had Thanksgiving on our minds when we set the date for tonight's broadcast. I just ate turkey, so if I fall asleep, it's nothing personal. Okay.
Tryptophan, we'll blame that.
But I'll do my best to get through this tonight with my eyes open. We had a couple of conversations on the phone, and there's so much that you and I can talk about tonight, and I really don't know where you want to begin. I guess, what kind of led us to this was this previous but I mean, we can get into that another time. Where would you like to start? Where would you like to take us on this journey?
It's a good place to start, but I want to tell your audience that of all the judges that I have been submitting before in the last 8 years since I started this work in Indigenous law, and people I've spoken to in the press, etc., Rick, you've done the best job in preparing yourself. We spent 4 hours at least, 2 different 2-hour conversations preparing for this interview. So kudos to you for being so balanced and insisting on being well informed, because the Canadian people, more than ever now, deserve that preparation. So thank you.
Sure. So
The issue was with our Grand Chief, and my history is I went to the U.S. on a track scholarship. I came back as a lawyer at Osgoode Hall in Toronto. Went to Ottawa to work for the national team, and I tried to have Ben Johnson, the Olympic gold medalist in Canada, if those who are younger, had his gold medal taken away for steroid abuse. I tried to have him arrested, Vic, before he left Canada, and I was the only one in the country. I was the only one in the track world that would suspend him. I mean, he's the golden goose. He was the world record holder in 1975, so 1985. And so it was a very unpopular stand that I took, but I felt that the steroids were not needed. I ran for the greatest track program in world history at Villanova University in Philadelphia. More Olympians and medalists than anybody else under one coach. And so we were on the wrong track, but we were going to embarrass the whole country. And of course, that came true. I think Canada is at a crossroads because we're either going to embarrass ourselves again regarding Indigenous law. Watch that word, please, Indigenous law. And being the richest country in the world. This is why Canada, Rick, has been attacked under this term pretendian, that some Indigenous people can, Rick can pretend to be an Iroquois, I guess, or an Algonquin in the East, or a Cree in the West, and get some kind of a stipend and take a job from somebody at the University of British Columbia, etc. That's a very small minded and small pool to be thinking in. The reason why the crown, this crown thing, and nobody ever thinks about the crown anymore, but it's very much there in the background of the banking system. The fact is that Canada is, Rick, the richest country in the world in resources. And the question is, how rich? President Putin has $70 trillion to run this BRICS system, this BRICS financial system, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And now Saudi Arabia joining, Cuba joining yesterday, if you saw that. So growing juggernaut called $7 trillion or $100 trillion. Canada is worth $700.
Sorry, we're losing your audio. There must be something going on with your mic. Yeah, we lost it altogether there.
Are you back now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sounds like you're on your camera mic, but I can hear you.
No, yeah, on my camera mic. So Canada is worth $700 trillion, 10 times the amount of the big guy on the block, Russia. So that is why Canada is attacked under this racial thinking that the Indians are over here and the settlers from Europe are over here, and people are coming in from India, as you just were saying at the outset. And so the whole racial divide that exists in the United States, I lived there for 40 years, between blacks and whites, primarily and lately the Asian population in the U.S., fighting in the high schools, etc. All of this is being orchestrated from behind the scenes in order to keep people away from the fact that we are the wealthiest country in the world. We can certainly pay to feed the world, and we can certainly pay to bring the world back to peace. And that's always been, Rick, Canada's international reputation as a nation of peace. Lester B. Pearson in the 60s as an example. And so that's where we are today as far as what Justin Trudeau's government. I'm not a liberal, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a lawyer, I have a master's degree in history, and I take my training in history is to follow the evidence where it goes.
Can I ask you this? How did this? You said $700 trillion. Where does that number come from? What's your source for that?
There's a hockey player by the name of Boyd Anderson, And Boyd Anderson played on a legendary hockey line in Medicine Hat, Alberta, with Lanny McDonald and Ron Gresham. He was the third on the young kid on that line, and he scored 5 goals in 3 minutes and 7 seconds. Scored 5 goals in 3 minutes and 7 seconds, and the record will never be broken. He ends up in Dubai selling med beds after he retired from hockey. And he's introduced to Swiss bankers. And the Swiss bankers are the ones who give him the number for Canada that Canadians are not told. And that's where I got the number, $700 trillion. There's so much lithium, fresh water, so much gold in Quebec, not just Val d'Or in the north.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you actually come up with a real number, because who knows how much is really under the earth, or who knows how much oil is there? Who knows how much ultimately, you're able to extract. In the U.S., for instance, there were many people who thought the oil reserves there had been pretty much tapped out. Now they're getting into fracking. So now well, who knew we had all that oil still available to us? So I think it's a very difficult thing to quantify, but okay, we can go with 700 trillion if you want.
Let's go to the other side of the coin, which has become my specialty. I've written a 5-book series on health and finances and banking. And most of the judges that I have faced, all of them, have no idea how the banking system works. I mean, the Swiss banking system has $2,500 trillion. $2,500 trillion. $2.5 quadrillion, Rick, in debt. If we just change topics a little bit from the 700 trillion in hard assets that Canada has or doesn't have, we go to the Swiss banking system. And Rick, when you put $100 into CIBC or BMO, under the law, who owns the $100?
Ask the question again. When I put $100 into the bank,
into any central bank, Chase Bank in New York, CIBC in downtown London, Ontario.
Well, those are not central banks. Those are commercial banks.
Well, the commercial banks are all centered in Basel, Switzerland. The Bank of International Settlements is the Bank of World Settlement every night.
No, commercial banks are not central banks.
Are you saying that the CIBC is not controlled by Chase Bank? Go ahead.
Chase Bank is a commercial bank. They are like CIBC. They engage in commercial banking. So a central bank is like the Federal Reserve. That's a central bank. So Chase Bank is not a central bank. CIBC is not a central bank. Toronto Dominion, not a central bank. Those are commercial banks. They deal in retail, financial services, and also they can conduct some other business, and they in the exchange markets. But those are commercial banks. They're not central banks. So governments
$100.
So yeah,
CIBC, a Canadian bank, who owns money.
Who owns it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, at that point, I mean, I still have claim to it, so I can. It's my right to go there to extract it, to withdraw it at some point. They, of course, also become owner of it, and they only need to hold in reserve about 20% of what they actually lend back out. So they have ownership of it, but so too do I, because it's currency, right? So it's a liquid thing.
Yeah, very good. The case is called Vukovic versus RBC, 1997, Ontario Court of Appeal. And in Vukovic, it says clearly, and no doubt, that the bank owns the $100 and Rick is the creditor.
Yes.
Then when you go in to apply for a mortgage, Now you become the debtor, and that's
Yes.
where the switcheroo occurs.
Oh, sure, because when you put your money in the bank, you're essentially lending it to the bank. They pay you interest because they're a commercial bank. They give you like, well, these days, like 1% maybe, right? Because interest rates are sort of low, historically speaking. And then but then when you go to get a mortgage, you're borrowing money from the bank. So they're essentially lending you back money that you've deposited, or they're lending you someone else's money in reality because you're getting a much larger sum. And they lend that to you at a higher interest rate because they're a commercial bank. And just like a used car dealer, they're going to act like a loan shark and jack up the interest rate and charge you a much higher commercial retail interest rate.
Right, but it used to be that the bank could only lend out what they had on deposit. This is before 1913, the Federal Reserve Act in Washington. But now when they get your $100, they can multiply that under the Federal Reserve System. They can multiply and start printing up the currency. So when Rick goes in to get his mortgage of $1 million, they're just saying, come back at 3 o'clock. We're going to deposit into your computer account at CIBC. We're going to deposit, a million units. They've just printed it up, Rick. They didn't have it from all the people in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and all across the country.
Who are you saying printed the money?
CIBC.
No, CIBC doesn't print money.
That's their job.
No, CIBC isn't allowed to print money. They're a commercial bank. Commercial banks don't print money.
The Bank of Canada controls the CIBC.
The Bank of Canada has the authority to print money, but the CIBC does not print money. TD does not print money. They're not allowed to print money. The only way that you can, as a bank, in essence, and I can do this even as a business, the only way that you can sort of create currency, and it's not really creating currency, but you can inject currency into the system through debt by like extending a loan to you. So I could conduct a service for you and then give you 30 days to pay. Now you've created essentially currency out of thin air, but there has to be liquidity in the market and enough growth within the market for that money to come back. But I can't print money, and either can CIBC, neither can TD Bank. The central bank can print money. They can order money to be printed. But through the federal government, they can print money. And then they can inject that into the system through the monetary system. But those are not central banks. And if they do that, that's counterfeiting. So they can't do it. They're subject to a whole different set of rules.
And where are those rules?
Well, those are
CIBC.
Those are rules that every sovereign country has with regard to money printing, and so those, the amount of currency that is created is monetary policy, which is what's dictated really by the central bank, how much money printing takes place, or on the flip side of that, how much money is borrowed. They can print it, you can borrow it. There are different, you can use taxation, different ways to create revenue flow for any government. So the rules would vary from country to country, depending on the constitution and the different pieces of legislation that are passed over time and how they choose to govern their own finances. And then there are additional agreements and international laws and contracts that take place between governments and different central banks to govern through contracts how money flows worldwide.
So the Bank of Canada, if people go to the Bank of Canada Act, and I was very surprised by this, Rick, if you go to Section 16 of the Bank of Canada Act, you'll read that the operations of our central bank, our national bank, or what do you want to call this thing, is secret. The operations are secret. Section 17 states that the 100,000 shares, back in the day when they started the central bank in 1948, the Section 17 says the 100,000 shares are owned by whom? Our national bank. Who owns those shares?
Who owns our central bank?
Who owns that? There's 100,000 shares issued under Section
Mhm.
17 of the Bank of Canada.
Yeah. So most central banks are owned by the member banks. So you've got your commercial banks who can then participate in the governance of those central banks and help provide guidance and administration of those banks. So it's banks sort of being involved with the banks
In Canada,
most cases.
in Canada, Section 17 says the 100,000 shares of our bank, look at our bank, are controlled by the Minister of Finance on behalf of the Crown in right of Canada.
Yeah.
And this is where I began to become concerned as a Canadian. That Bank of Canada, 100,000 shares, which is now many, many more shares over the last, 6 decades or so, those shares should be owned by Canadians. They're owned by this thing called the Crown in right of Canada, which is a trade name.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would just say Canadian. And so the fact is that the banks are able to just print up this currency. That's why somebody in Toronto can get a loan for $1 million. The bank just prints up the currency. It's called cash creation now, instead of what a bank used to do is just give out as much deposits as they have. They can lend that out at 5%, etc. So this is where you and I will disagree, and it's okay to disagree. But there's a real problem that your readership should look into, your audience should look into, as far as what this central bank is in Canada, this Bank of Canada thing, and why is it secret? And if you watch when Justin Trudeau was sworn in 2015, at 1 hour and 14 minutes, he repeats the same oath as every minister in his cabinet, whether liberal or conservative. And that oath, Rick, is the same oath as in the Bank of Canada. He swears an oath to the Crown, whatever this Crown thing is.
Well, that's the government, is what the Crown is.
Let's go to the next. Right, let me finish.
Yeah.
To the Queen and the Privy Council in secret. Now you might think, well, that's just because there's international, national security, whatever. But I'll suggest to your audience is that there's a real problem here with this control of this banking system. It is not in the shares are not owned by Canadian people, and this takes us back to the Indigenous issue about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the UNDRIP, we'll call it, right? UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And the massive misunderstanding, which is where I first saw your interview with our former chief, Labiska, who retired, who taught me about banking and has seemed to have a change of heart or whatever. But under the UNDRIP, whatever this thing is that's come out of Geneva, there is a new banking system.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd just like to pause for a moment and just address this issue of secrecy. I understand that the word is there, but I don't think that it means necessarily. I don't think that it's being used in proper context here, because with regard to secrecy, there's a level of confidentiality that always comes with financial transactions. For instance, my wife is a banker, right? A commercial banker. So when she comes home, she can't talk to me about anything she does at work, because she can't tell me who came in to see her that day. She can't tell me if, a friend of mine came in and said, even if he says, say hi to Rick for me, right? She can't really say that to me in a way that lets me know that he was in there to see her as a client necessarily. She has to be very careful about anything she says to me, because it's money stuff and it's confidential. And that extends even to governments, right? So that's why a lot of these, the secrecy aspect of it is really more, I think, akin or is centered around the necessity for a level of confidentiality in financial transactions. But I mean, you can interpret that or elaborate on that if you want, or tell me if I'm full of beans.
Well, we'll go back to the private banks that were in 1913 in Washington, D.C. when they passed the Federal Reserve Act.
Yeah.
Right, and that in Canada was eventually captured into that system in 1940s when they created the Bank of Canada, but because it's a global borrowing system, you know, on what you're describing is a private banking system, and I have no problem with that. But where is the public banking system, where it's all on board, above board, and it's financed not by a computer entry of $1 million loan to Rick in his computer.
But there is transparency, especially in Western society and certainly in Canada. Like the Bank of Canada is actually quite open about its monetary policy decisions. It regularly publishes its interest rate decisions. It has news conferences to explain them. It has economic forecasts, policy reports. There are full up reports that are with public disclosures that are offered to the public annually. The governing council's meetings and decisions on interest rates are communicated to the public through press releases with detailed explanations on their rationale. I mean, you can go on and on. There is confidentiality, though, and specific details around daily market operations, such as the timing and specifics of open market operations or liquidity management. Might not be disclosed in real time to prevent market manipulation. That's another reason why they have to have secrecy, to avoid like insider trading and giving people unfair advantages. If you know, because they're being careless with information, that there's an interest rate increase or decrease coming, then you know how to invest maybe ahead of time. So they're very careful about making sure that information is released in a timely and fair and transparent manner so that all people get all the information at the same time. I mean, you can go on, and there's, you know, very strict governance in the way that these banks are supposed to operate. And when things go off the rails, as they did just last week, as we saw in the United States with the Toronto Dominion Bank, not following the proper rules and not checking to see, you know, if organized crime is using their system to launder money, they can get into a whole lot of trouble and tarnish the reputation of the entire system. Or when Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland decide to seize bank accounts of truckers, right? That is, you know, that can be a big problem.
Well, let's go to the much bigger problem, and this is why so far I don't know you that well, but in our 5 hours together so far, it's been very intriguing. HSBC Bank. And HSBC Bank is a private bank of England. It doesn't come from Hong Kong. It is one of the big 5 banks in downtown city of London. Those who don't know the difference, there's Greater London with Buckingham Palace and the bridge and the whole thing going on for tourists. Then there's the small city of London, the square mile, where the private financial sectors do their business. HSBC was nailed in 2010, and Wabisca Mukwa was part of trying to uncover this HSBC scandal, that they were involved in funding drug money for pedophilia. And that was going to be exposed in Montreal in 2016, downtown Montreal, by people that we knew on the street, on the ground. We sued HSBC to have them run out of Canada. And the big brass from HSBC in England was brought to Washington, D.C. to have a little meeting with the Department of Justice. And the fine was, I think, $3 billion. You know, when a billion was a billion, right? And so that fine was what it took to get HSBC, a private bank that you could invest in, off the hook for this wild money laundering leading to pedophilia claim. And the DOJ was stymied in the U.S. Fast forward to 2020, England, London's DOJ.
You're talking about some stuff that's like really throwing me for a loop here. Like what specifically, what charges are we talking about here?
Google the fine that HSBC paid in 2010 for money laundering.
Okay, let me just
Google the fine.
How much was the fine for?
I think it was $2 billion. Might have been 3 billion.
Let me just see here. What are 200 million in 2010? Is that the one? Or there's
maybe it's 2016. There was a second one.
20. An unspecified issue. I'm not finding anything on this. There was something about illegal trading. When was this? That's not clear to me when that was. That was in 2023, that post, so that can't be that. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of this.
Fined by the U.S. government. I'm looking it up now. Yeah, $1.256 billion was the settlement. So in those cases, you don't really find out what the actual allegations were. There's a
Well, then we better be very careful what we say here, because I don't want to get sued for making any incorrect, allegations or anything, right?
Private agreement. It's an NDA. Was signed, and HSBC was let go. They were sued again in England. I'm pretty sure it was 2020 for tax evasion. And that was settled for, I think, $40 million. So the fine went down from $1.5 billion or $2 billion, went down to $40 million 10 years later, proving that HSBC Bank, with its money laundering problems, like TD Bank just had, is too big to sue. But the indigenous chiefs of Canada, 2 of them, who were brave enough, tried to remove HSBC in federal court from this country. And we would have failed because London failed. 10 years earlier, Washington, D.C.'s DOJ, they failed. What's curious to me is that HSBC was bought out by RBC. And so whatever's going on with these private banks and what they're using their commercial monies, using your deposits to multiply times 20, that they can multiply times 20 the deposits, to fund, is a little bit nefarious. Now, whatever's going on over there with your wife's job, and it's a great job, and she's doing well, and it's private, and she is honoring the secrecy of the depositors. Let's compare it to the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People that allow the Canadian people to have their own financial system. What people are not aware of is that Justin Trudeau, because of his father Pierre Trudeau in 1974, applied to the Central Bank of Switzerland to borrow money through, or currency, let's call it currency, let's set our terms. Money is gold and silver, always has been for tens of thousands of years. It's been gold and silver on this planet or the flat earth, right? And so a sovereign country, Rick, prints its own currency, its own money. We're a long way from that today. But Canada, being the richest country in the world, as I'm alleging, in 1974 owed $18 billion after they built the St. Lawrence Seaway and the railroads across the country. We owe just $18 billion. Within 10 or 20 years after going to this crazy deal to borrow something from Switzerland through Chase Bank in New York, who lends Trudeau the money, Justin Trudeau the money, lends it to him, we now owe almost $2 trillion. The United States owes $35.3 trillion, growing astronomically. And that is the real.
How much money did he borrow, did you say?
I think Canada's debt now is $2 trillion total.
And so you're saying that Pierre Trudeau.
When he borrowed the money in 1974, President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971.
Right. Yeah.
3 years later, Pierre Trudeau took us with the United States off a gold standard and started to borrow money from a central bank in downtown Basel, Switzerland, over in Europe instead of printing our own currency.
Which bank are you talking about in
Basel,
Switzerland?
Bank of International Settlement. Every night they have to balance the books around the world.
Yeah, doesn't work like that.
No, of course they treat it like that.
It doesn't work like that.
There's a meeting there every month on the 18th
Yes.
floor of the Bank of International
Yeah.
Settlements. And the orders come down from on high
Mhm.
into that meeting to figure out who's going to do what. Now, Canada, what Pierre Trudeau did, which was quite good, he got us into the G7 or G20. He got us into the top tier. But nobody knows who owns the very top tier, the Bank of International Settlements. That is a secret. Those are secret families. Those are secret families.
That's
that
not.
own,
No, it's not true.
Well, then prove to me, when you go online now, who owns the Bank of International?
The Bank of International Settlements is owned by the various. It's a group of central banks. So it's the participating banks who are part of the mostly. It's basically Western countries. So
when I ran for mayor in Toronto, I just ran
Yeah.
for a lark when Rob Ford was
Right.
last year of what he was doing in 2014. I got back to Canada. Just threw my hat in the ring and see what the hell's going on in Toronto. I hadn't been home in 40 years. I began to research, who owns BMO. It turns out it's the other four banks. Who owns CIBC? It's the other four banks. And so you can invest in it. There's a quote public offering, but you can only ever get Canadians as a group or humans in the world can only ever get 49% of the central banks of Canada, the big five plus the bank plus Bank National plus the Central Bank of Canada. You could
Who are
not
the
get
who are
control.
who are these people in the? Who are these people that are trying to get into our show? Do you know these people?
Perhaps, I don't know.
Dan Bon Jovi and Errol.
East Moore Tribe, yeah.
Who? I wasn't expecting any of this. Who are they?
I didn't know if it was going to be live or not, but they're from our tribe. We were on a Zoom call this afternoon. They wanted your email, your link. So Dan's part of it.
Okay, well, maybe we'll bring him in a while. I want to kind of focus on these subjects.
They can follow the tape. They can follow the tape, right?
Sure. Oh yeah. So, okay, continue.
Well,
I'm listening.
Well, whatever is going on with the central banks, which began in 1913, right?
Yeah.
Which were private banks and are private banks till today. Whatever that system is, it's like Home Depot and Lowe's. I was a contractor for 40 years. I can shop at either store, but in Canada there's just one central bank. In the United States there are 12 or so, 13 banks, central banks plus Chase Bank, the head bank.
No, those are not central banks. Those are commercial banks. It's different. This is the Bank of International Settlements right here, and the financial system doesn't really quite work the way that you're suggesting, because the Bank of International Settlements is really there to provide financial stability. They will like it because it's so what it really is it's like the central banks that are participants in the Bank of International Settlements, who are member banks, and that's like the larger central banks in the world, especially in the West. Okay, so they are member banks, and they also have people who they are basically the membership. Then the BIS has its own board of governors, and what they do is they will loan money to banks in order to provide financial stability, but they're not really like long-term lenders. If, for instance, a government runs into a liquidity issue where maybe they are, because they're only holding, say, maybe 20% in reserve at any given time, and then there's demand for withdrawals, or they need to come up with cash quickly so that they don't have to print money and inflate things, they can go to the BIS and get a loan, sometimes only even for days or maybe for a number of months, and then they can put that money back in. That's really what the BIS is there for. They're there for the purpose of providing financial stability so they can kind of cooperate with each other to make sure that there's liquidity in any of the given markets.
I've heard the
But
liquidity
that's,
argument myself.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Also, the liquidity argument is, the overnight window I hear about. Banks can go in a real pinch to the overnight window and borrow there. There's a reason why when Pierre Trudeau was prime minister of this country, we only owed $18 billion. And there's a reason why today Canadian people owe almost $2 trillion. It's because they're printing up currency in this BIS system of some commercial banks and some central banks. No one really understands what's going on, but nobody knows who owns those member banks. They have shares in the overall BIS, but nobody, Rick, knows who owns those central banks. These are private banks. It's called the Federal Reserve Bank. It's not federal. There's no reserves at all. There's no gold there. There's no gold in Fort Knox to back it all up. These banks are private banks who now, going back to the original part of our discussion, when the Rick Walkers put in their $100, now that banker, whatever he's done with his investments, right? His investments, he owns the 100. He multiplies it times 20. Now he's lending out $2,000 from the 100. He's printed $90 to invest for his own purposes, either in mortgages, whatever he's doing with it, going to the racetrack, whatever they're doing. They still owe the Rick Walkers of the world their $100 deposit. And now last year, the BIS central bank confirmed that they owe their depositors $2.5 trillion, and they can't pay because they ballooned the whole thing up to buy their yachts and their mansions and whatever else they're doing with Jeffrey Epstein, pedophilia, whatever else they're doing behind the scenes, and we know it's there. That they can't pay us back. So compare that system of debt to what we're proposing under the UNDRIP. And we'll go back to the main part of our discussion of this United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and who benefits from this, and if we're correct that Canada can now fashion its own sovereign bank owned by the people as opposed to the crown. Did I go too fast? No, but I don't agree with your assessment, honestly. Like, the Bank of International Settlements is, we know who owns it. It's owned by the member central banks, and that's 60. I just looked it up. 63 different central banks from countries around the world. And they account for 95% of the world's GDP. That's a whole lot of money. And I don't think at any point that the Bank of International Settlements has come out to say that they're broke and they can't pay anything back. It's a debt-based system. It's a debt-based system. It's creating debt. Every time you turn around in Canada, you're creating more debt. You're credit worthy to borrow more currency. It's a debt-creating system. And it's enslaving. It's enslaved today. The richest country in the world is Canada, is my position. People can't afford their housing. They're having trouble affording food.
Even that is a very strong word. What do you mean enslaved?
Well, the enslavement occurs when since the New Deal in 1933 or 34, which was invented by Canadian Prime Minister Bennett, came up with this, he's a lawyer.
Well, that's FDR.
He taught it to FDR. I've got his book here downstairs. I just bought it for $1 from our library. The book on Bennett.
That's deflation. I think it was worth $1.50 when it was first published.
So in 1933, they confiscated the gold, right? FDR. Prime Minister Bennett in Canada, Adolf Hitler in Germany. They stole the gold or confiscated it from the people.
Well, they compensated, but
you don't have any gold and silver.
You shouldn't have any, or you'd be arrested, or you're
Yeah,
hiding.
because they
Well,
took us off the gold standard.
and then they put us on to what's called a social credit score.
Right.
Okay, and then inviting your mother to apply. You're born, right? You're born. We went through this when we discussed it before in our discussion about who is Indigenous in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a real bugaboo on the show until we get into it.
Mm-hmm.
What we're arguing and suggesting is that when Rick Walker was born in Ontario, he's the same as any German born in Germany. He's Indigenous to Ontario. He's not Algonquin. He's not Wendat. He's not, Cree. He is just born here. 2 weeks later, an application comes to do what? To apply for a birth certificate. And so that birth certificate is sent where? I thought Timmins, Ontario, until my friend who was third in command of the government under Brian Mulroney in the 90s, when he got me, Rick, and I just filed in Alberta court a month ago, when he brought me my social insurance number, registered where? In Chase Bank in New York, so Justin Trudeau can borrow currency against what? My labor. It's a birth certificate bond against my labor until I'm 65 years old.
Where do you see that your birth certificate is registered with Chase Bank?
It's called the GMEI. It's an electricity registry, and this is how this system works. You're not part of, that the Crown is part of. This is part of a system where if you go to the Edgar EDGAR, they put dots in, Edgar search engine, we type in Canada. I was challenged to do this by a clan mother in Australia, over Australia, and she said Australia is registered on the Securities and Exchange Commission in Washington, D.C. So I went and I did that. I typed in Canada Inc. and up Canada, and up came our federal government registered at 501 Pennsylvania Avenue that's our embassy. The Law Society, when I told this to the Law Society during investigations of what I was putting into the courts, they said, that's another Canada. That's a Canada, some corporation. No, that's 501 Pennsylvania Avenue. I lived down in Philadelphia, so I knew our embassy's address, right? That's our embassy on the stock exchange. So now I find out British Columbia, Alberta, I just found Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, those four are all registered on the stock market and regulated by the SEC in Washington. And I've asked judges about this, and they go, oh, that's so we can borrow money. And I say, well, Rick, why are we borrowing money at interest? The poor Canadians are up to here. We lead the Western world in credit card debt. Used to be the Americans, now it's us. And so Canadians have borrowed the max to their houses that are worth $1 million, let's say, they're worth $1 million. Now they've got the mortgage up to here, and they've got the credit cards maxed out until the next inflationary cycle comes. The next printing from Washington. Right? As long as Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, they each printed about $5 billion, but Obama printed trillion. Obama printed $9 trillion. Now the United States owes $35 trillion. And this is the warning I have for the judges who are in charge of Canada's well-being lawfully. And Canadians, the U.S. owes $35 trillion, and that's going up by $1 trillion every quarter. They cannot pay that back. So what are we going to do when the U.S. defaults on their loan?
Well,
Not if. It's inevitable now. It's going up at $1 trillion a quarter. That's a fact.
I don't know that it's inevitable. It could well happen. It's happened in history before. It doesn't have to happen. We've seen countries default on. We've seen countries with their currency crash. We saw it with the Weimar Republic. We've seen it with other countries, to Greece, Venezuela.
I've got the book on my shelf here by Perkins, John Perkins, about the economic hitman. what they would do is go into South America, led by Canadian-based companies from around the world who are registered in Toronto. They go into South America. They set up what? An electric grid, right, that they're going to control in order to get out the resources out of that country and saddle them with the cost of the extraction and of the setting up of the electric grid to run the computers and everything else in Bolivia. And in the end, the economic hitman confirmed that 7 leaders in South America were all murdered in airplane accidents. It's his book. It's a New York Times bestseller. There's another.
Yeah, well, I've heard of it. I haven't read his book.
Well,
I understand that, you have people, companies that invest in other countries to capitalize the extraction of resources that is actually can be a very good thing for a country. It creates jobs. Am I missing something here?
Yes, because the jobs they get, right? The indigenous jobs that were given when they crossed again in BC. This is where I got in trouble with the Law Society.
Yeah.
That in 1997, the Delgamuukw in northern BC were the only nation in this country, indigenous nation, that was sovereign, and they won their case at the Supreme Court, 1997. In 2011, Harper wanted to go across from the tar sands, across northern BC, across Delgamuukw land. And my client from Belleville, Ontario, went out there to the West Coast and organized the Delgamuukw to stop Harper from going across in 2011. The RCMP took all 10 of his children. The last one was 2 hours old. And they took them, Rick, after the Truth Commission in 2015 said, stop taking the indigenous children. It's genocide. That's what our $60 million study came out with. It's part 5 of the Truth Commission. And so what I did is I ended up recommending that the mothers who were found to be loving and bonded to their children, these are not alcoholic, drug-dealing indigenous women with no teeth. Whatever you think about indigenous people, these were wonderful young women who were loving and bonded, perfect parents, but they're married or they're in a relationship to have children. They were surrogate mothers for the Mohawk medicine man. It was him was the problem because he was stopping the pipeline in northern BC, and that's where Justin Trudeau went in 2019. If you remember, they closed the railroad. When the RCMP went back across northern BC, they couldn't get through Vancouver, remember, because the whale watchers were there. So yeah, you can disturb the whales. Trudeau had to go back through Delgamuukw land and over the barricades, etc., and arrest those people with British Columbia warrants and everything else that the justice system did. The point of the story is who owns those resources in northern BC? Who owns the resources of the Amazon? It's clearly the people born there and not the investors from downtown Toronto. And now we find out the Hud Bay case has been going on for 10 years. The Hud Bay case, they went down there, Rick, and our Canadian-based companies raped those women. I'm sorry to be so graphic on your show. It's in the court record, but people are, who's paying attention to that? The case is going on 10 years. The Hud Bay company case, it's a sub-company of another company, who's saying, oh, it wasn't us who raped these women.
Okay, well, again, Glenn, respectfully, we're getting into allegations that are very serious. That if we're going to make those kinds of allegations, I'm always trying to be very careful about anything that these are legal things. So, and you're a lawyer.
For 10 years, they've examined these women. They've been cross-examined.
And are these people convicted? Do we know? Where I don't know what these cases are about, so I get uncomfortable talking about any kind of criminal allegations like this that might defame someone.
No, these are not criminal.
Rape is a criminal thing.
This is what they're alleging, but nobody. I'm not aware that the Attorney General of Canada.
So these haven't been proven in court, so we don't know. So nobody's been convicted. So we need to make that very clear.
My point is, when I read this, I was shocked at where I read it, number one. I'll go to number 2 first, what they said. in this in the court record. These international mining companies come to Canada because our judiciary is very light on enforcing. This was the first woman. She came from the Amazon into the Toronto court, and for the first time, a female judge in Toronto in 2013 said, "No, I'm not knocking this case out of court early. This case will proceed." First time that the indigenous people of South America ever won in a foreign court the first round. Now they're still going.
What was you're kind of losing me a bit. So what was the court case? And is this really important to the central conversation we're having, or is this a sidebar?
Resources. Who owns the resources, and where is the criminality? The criminality appears to be in these corporations in downtown Toronto, the 75 headquarters here, and they hire subcontractors to go in, like Blackwater, to go like the instance Blackwater, to go in security companies, right, at arm's length, it's another corporation, to go into the Amazon and wipe out the inhabitants that are there. Now, this is the same problem we have with the Murdered and Missing Women's Inquiry. It's been going on for almost a decade, since the Truth Commission came out in 2015, which Justin Trudeau said is murder. Somebody is murdering the Indigenous women and their daughters when they're living near vast resource. That is a fact.
Tell me then. Just let's back up a little bit. We're going a million miles an hour here and covering a lot of ground. So it's your position that big corporations are essentially stealing the resources?
Yes. The book was called The Shock Doctrine by Canada's world famous Naomi Klein, a brilliant journalist, over the 30-year reign of terror in Argentina and Chile.
I wouldn't say that that's the case. I think that you get a lot of people on the political left and especially communists, who make those kinds of claims, or people who don't really understand how the process of capitalizing and extracting resources needs to work, and it has to work. And it's generally those kinds of allegations are coming from people who want to nationalize resources rather than you have any private investment. So it's just the classic struggle between capitalism and socialism, or even communism, and people who make those kinds of assertions are generally people who would prefer to see the nationalization of resources. But I understand the process, and it's not accurate or fair to say that these companies go in and steal the resources. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And they facilitate and even make it possible for countries to turn their resources into wealth, because the resources in the ground, Glenn, are worth zero, really, unless they can be extracted. And if you have a country like even Stalin during his industrial revolution didn't have the capital to facilitate the mechanization of the Soviet Union. That's what's kind of going on in Ukraine. So,
Rick, I love you. Rick, I love you. Should we talk about Stalin?
But look. So what happens is, if you are a country and you don't have the like, even in Canada with our oil sands, if you go back and you look at what went on in the 70s and the 80s, and we needed to develop technologies in order to extract the oil from the oil sands, and that was going to require huge capitalization. There was massive risk involved because it depended on the price of oil and whether it was going to be profitable, and should our federal government and we as taxpayers finance all of that and just dump all this money in and try to capitalize all of that, or do you encourage and allow foreign investment, say through American, and that was a big issue back in the day. Do you allow U.S. companies, oil companies, to come in and participate in that through investment and bring capital, money, and not just the money, but the machinery, the know-how, the technology, the patented processes, and the researchers, all of the things that would be necessary to allow to add the value to the resource that is still stuck in the ground. You have to be able to get that out someplace. That requires massive capitalization, which people don't understand what capitalism is, but that's what it is. It's investment. So if you have a big oil company and they have the machinery and they already have the wealth, then they can bring that to bear and they can invest that, but then they get a share of the ownership. You as the landholder and maybe the mineral rights owners or the resource owner, right? Then you get to have a share, but so too does the person investing the capital, or the company, or even a foreign government can do that. And that investment is helpful, because that's an investment that then can add value, create jobs, create more wealth, add value to make that resource worth even more, so that you make the country even more wealthy and you make the people wealthier. And if you don't have those resources available to you, or maybe you don't want to go into debt so that you're $17 trillion in debt, you can have these private companies come in and invest it so that you don't have to, and you don't have to take the risk. And in the oil sands case, some of those companies did lose a lot of money. Some of them didn't even make it, right? And they ended up folding. So they lost everything that they invested in the development of the oil sands in Western Canada. Other ones today are making some money. Suncor, I think that they kind of came out okay. I'd have to go back and check all my history on it, but that's capitalism. And that means that federal governments and people, taxpayers, don't need to go further into debt. We don't need to mortgage our futures, but we can say, hey, if you want to come in and take a shot at this, but that doesn't mean they're stealing everything. It means that they're investing. And there's a hell of a big difference between theft and investment.
Now we're on to it. So let's go to the Norwegian Sovereign Fund.
Sure.
You know the Norwegian Sovereign Fund started in 1990, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
The Norwegians, those clever Norwegians, started to tax Standard Oil, Exxon. They started to tax them for the oil before it came out of the ocean around and the lands of Norway. Today, the Norwegian Sovereign Fund's a main player for the Norwegian people at $1.2 trillion in assets. That's $300,000 almost for every man, woman, and child. Not a person, not a social insurance illegal person. This is the divide between indigenous law and the Crown law from London, England. The Crown law recognizes persons, legal entities. The indigenous law protects the men and women of what's called Turtle Island, the Western Hemisphere. We're Turtle Island North here in Canada. So during COVID, if people had $300,000 in a sovereign account in Canada, you would have had a much different outcome from those 4 years of financial disaster. But the fellow who said, no, Rick, don't bring the resources out of the ground unless you need it for computers, silver for computers, or chromium, whatever you need for bumpers. Monetize it in the ground. That was Warren Buffett. And that's where the indigenous people that I worked with got the idea, wait a minute. Canada has the right under the UNDRIP Declaration of the United Nations to, four articles, let us have our own financial system. Not the system that you're describing, and you're not quite well read enough there, that they run the people off the ground in South America. I had a lawyer call me from Texas in 2006.
Well, look, I mean, how governments handle this from state to state, right?
This Texas lawyer, I was doing this work in the courts of Ontario for these 10 children that were taken by the Harper government. It was cultural genocide. It was a cultural genocide. And I sued the judge underneath the Cultural Genocide Act of Canada for taking children from women who were loving and bonded to those children. But the Texas lawyer called me and said, Glenn, when I forget the oil company went into the Amazon in a certain area, there were 3,600 people. And when they left 2 years later, there were only 300 people left. I said, and that was my early baptism in 2016, in this whole indigenous resources, how brutal the mining companies are on one side of the balance sheet, because it's true, this is a court case going on in Canada now with Canadian companies, but the other side is you don't have to bring the resources out of the ground. It's our financial system owned by the Canadian people who are born here. And the big fight we started out in the start of this podcast was, if you're born in Turtle Island North, you're born in, call it Canada, you're born here, you have an equal share in the resources. You're not Cree, you're not Métis, I'm a Métis, you're not Algonquin, those are cultures, just like Swiss and German and Greek and Italian. Those are all cultures all around the world, but in Canada, they have this split psychosis that the you and what your discussion with the Grand Chief was about the pretendians and somebody pretending. Now the UN Declaration at Article 3 gives every single Canadian, every single man and woman, never mind citizen, you can go into that citizenship if you want, but every single man and woman, it's Article 44 of the UNDRIP, men and women, they each can do what, Rick? They can self-determine. Today you can say you're gay, trans, Greek, Australian.
It does use that language, yes.
You want to say, as a human being, as a man or woman born here in Canada, our law, our indigenous common laws, and we'll go into that in a minute, the indigenous common laws have been here since 1774. That's the Quebec Act. When King George III in the 7 Years' War, he took, he protected the British citizens living in downtown Quebec City. But that had nothing to do with indigenous common law. This is the Supreme Court decision in 2021, just 3 years ago, when the Supreme Court, 9-0, 7-2, stated that indigenous common law is presumed to continue on Turtle Island, Canada, the U.S., Brazil, right? Because the indigenous people were watch Rick now, never conquered. And I said, holy crap, let's look at that from a Canadian point of view. On the Plains of Abraham, right, in 1759 or so, the Canadians were never conquered, Rick. The British were beating the shit out of each other with the French. Wolfe and Montcalm killed each other, and then they all went home, right? And nothing to do with Canadians at all. This country has never been conquered. And therefore, here's the bombshell question for the judges who refuse to answer so far. 50 of them have refused to answer my question. Where is the Canada Act and the BNA Act before that? Where are they passed? Which parliament?
Well, you're going to tell me it was in London.
London, England. And so in 1774, there's a very famous case called Campbell versus Hall. And in that case, Lord Mansfield, who was world renowned, as big as the world was then, said that acts passed in London, now watch this, folks, are only valid over a conquered people. Canada Act came here. It was never passed by our Ottawa Parliament, which is on unceded land. There's no treaty for Ottawa. I had a judge tell me that in Ottawa. Judge Charles Hackland told me, it's on the record, we've got the records of it, that Ottawa was never ceded. The Queen of England came, I think in April of that year, in 1982, and proclaimed, right, letters patent of a corporation. And that corporation is registered where? Washington, D.C., as part of the Virginia Company that started out in 1607 in Virginia from downtown London. The whole thing is a London banker's mirage run now out of the Chase Bank in New York, where your
So you're
birth
trying to say that Canada does not really exist.
No, it does exist as a corporation. The way the United States
just a corporation?
Yes, because people don't know their American history, is that the Constitution, right, that was passed in 1789 in the United States, was suspended in 1871 when the United States, after the Civil War, could not pay the debt of $5 billion to European banks. And so that's the second bankruptcy of the United States. You've got to watch your bankruptcy law, right? In 1789, what happened with Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, they couldn't pay the war debt back to France. They borrowed money from Louis to beat George III. They hired German troops, the Hessian soldiers in Valley Forge, where I lived, in Philadelphia. So they hired German troops. They owed the French king money. He lost the war to George. And now they owe George the money. Well, the Constitution of the U.S. of 1789, Rick, gives them 70 years to pay the debt back. Takes them to 1859. Now they were getting out of debt. Over the last 70 years, they were getting out of debt. When they marched the Cherokee to Oklahoma, right? They sold the land to Georgia. That was Andrew Jackson. So now they're out of debt. The bankers put them back in debt in 1865. They owed $5 billion. And who helped to pay that? The Canadians. We're obligated to pay that debt of the central bank in Washington. That is why Canada Inc. is registered there, along with Quebec Inc., Ontario Inc., Alberta Inc., and BC.
Yeah. So what? But Glenn, so what?
As a bankrupt corporation. That's why we're in debt $2 trillion, and our children's children's children will be. I sound like Peter Pan now, and Hook. I sound like Dustin Hoffman. Our children's children's children are going to be paying that $2 trillion debt. What we're saying is $2 trillion peanuts. Canada is worth $700 trillion.
Okay, let's slow down, because we're, I think we're going to lose people here. First of all, Canada is not just a corporation.
Go ahead.
It isn't, and I keep hearing people say that, but
I will give you the Supreme Court of Canada case, 1887. Just after the BNA Act was passed in 1867.
So you're saying Canada is just a corporation like, I don't know, General Motors or Burger King?
Yes, because the term being used in 1982 is letters patent.
Nope.
Letters patent.
Nope.
Any
Doesn't
lawyer
matter.
knows,
Doesn't matter. There are
patent.
aspects of the Canadian government that are run like a corporation. And plus, you also have crown corporations. And yes, you can actually buy stock in Canada on the stock market, but that does not mean that Canada is just a corporation. Canada is a sovereign nation state. And there are many things and it's demonstrable. It's true. It's absolutely true.
The Canada Act was not passed on this land.
Doesn't anything, at the end of the day, all these conflations and misinterpretations of these legal rulings, even that doesn't matter. You know why it doesn't matter? Let me tell you why it doesn't matter, Glenn. Because Canada has a seat at the United Nations. Does Burger King? No. Canada issues its own currency. Does Burger King? No.
No, it does not.
The best Burger King can do, is give you a coupon for a Whopper.
Canada borrows its money from Chase Bank.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Chase Bank is not a central bank. Chase Bank is a commercial bank. Where does Canada borrow its money from?
Chase Bank.
No, they don't. They borrow it from the Bank of Canada.
And where's that borrowed from? Chase Bank.
No, the Bank of Canada issues bonds, T-bills, all other kinds of financial securities. Where do they do that? On various financial markets around the world.
Issue credit.
They borrow it. They can borrow it from you, and because a number of years ago they opened Yeah, they do borrow. They can borrow from me. I can buy a Canada savings bond. You can invest in it. You can invest in T-bills. That's how they raise money on the financial markets. And then, yes, that's the way it's done. But they don't borrow money directly from Chase Bank because Chase Bank is a commercial bank. It's not a central bank. You've got it wrong. It's 100% wrong. Chase Bank is one of the largest commercial banks in the United States. And they engage in international finance, but they may actually sell securities as an underwriter for the Canadian government, but we do not borrow our money directly from like Chase Bank. We borrow it from the Bank of Canada.
The central bank of the United States is Chase Bank. There's 11 regional banks, but now they've changed them to commercial banks.
What's the central bank in the United?
Chase Bank.
No, it's not.
I'll send you the material tomorrow. I want to go back to my point of Canada being a corporation. In 1887, the Mercer, MERCER, versus the Attorney General of Canada, 1887, where the Supreme Court, Justice Gwynne, stated that the 4 eastern provinces, there weren't any others then, right? There was New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Upper Canada, and Lower Canada. They will continue as corporations. This has been ever since the 1607 Virginia Company.
Doesn't matter.
Wait. No, it doesn't matter. And the Hudson's Bay Company of 1670 was a corporation.
It was
dissolved in when? Yeah. 1 year after 1867.
Yeah.
British North America Act, they suddenly dissolved the Hudson's Bay Company of financial adventurers, and they roll it into the DNA Act of Canada, which was then had to be repealed in 1893, and then our Dominion.
All of these things. I understand what your argument is, but it doesn't hold water ultimately because Burger King doesn't have its own military. Burger King, and the difference is too, Glenn, that the Canadian government is not a corporation in the sense that GM or Ford or Burger King is a corporation, because those are all just, they have investors, shareholders, and their motive is profit, right? But the government of Canada is not just a profit-driven entity that is focused on a motive of profit. It has obligations to its citizens that transcend the profit motive.
You know the structure, Rick, of the Dutch East India Tea Company? You know the structure of that company, the East India, the Dutch? Now, we had the Dutch, then we had the British, and now we have the American, right? In the big empires. The original one, the Dutch East India Company, had its own military. It's a tea company.
You do have in some cases private armies or private militias even, but those are still governed by the sovereign state whose flag they are under. For instance, the Wagner Group under Yevgeny Prigozhin, when it was still operational, that was under the thumb of Vladimir Putin. It's a private military operation, but operates, at the good graces and with the blessing of the sovereign state that oversees it, and within the legal framework of the Russian Federation. Or there are private mercenary groups that are also hired by the Americans because they don't want to go to the draft. So they pay mercenaries to do this kind of work, but they operate within the framework and under the American flag and within that set of rules. But even then, those organizations or companies do not issue their own currency. That those mercenary groups, they have to pay their soldiers with the currency that is available to them through different kinds of banking systems. They're not sovereign states either, but Canada is definitely a sovereign country with a seat at the UN, with the authority to print its own currency. It passes laws, legislation that govern the land, that govern corporations. Corporations
Yes, yes.
don't pass
Now we're on-
laws that govern the government.
It governs the corporation. Now, I just put into court in Alberta the fact the Supreme Court of Canada is registered where?
Wait,
And
what?
the judge accepted it.
None
Where
of
is-
it's
where is the
irrelevant.
Where is the Supreme Court of Canada?
You're going to
registered?
tell me that what? You're going to tell me it's registered
Dun
on
and
the
Bradstreet.
on the
Dun and Bradstreet. The Ontario Court of Appeal,
So?
where I've argued many times, the Ontario Court of Appeal is
Yeah.
registered as a business on the Dun and Bradstreet.
Yeah,
Alberta
but these
is
these
registered
these government agencies or entities,
are courts.
they also need to operate as businesses because they have to conduct business transactions to
You're
conduct
talking about
their
the-
daily affairs.
Talking about the judiciary.
Yes.
Let's
So
go back
too
to
does government need to
Hudson's
operate.
Bay- the Hudson's Bay
they-
Company. The
Yeah.
Hudson's Bay Company had its own judiciary. It's a corporation. It had its own judiciary. The Lord Stanley report, the Stanley Cup, the Lord Stanley's report in 1858 stated they had no jurisdiction over the indigenous people, only the shareholders or employees of the corporation. I'm saying to you, Canada is Hudson's Bay Company number 4, right? Because there were 2 before that. So
It's transcended that.
it's how would
Mhm.
and I have no problem with people going to the Supreme Court of Canada or the Court of Appeal of Ontario.
Yeah.
These are why I revered as a lawyer. But there it is. I've got the documents from Dun and Bradstreet. You're going to a Costco Court of Appeal Supreme Court.
No.
As opposed to indigenous people born here who own the resources. And the Canada Act was not passed.
Well, when I go to Costco, they don't have the authority to throw me in the slammer. But if I go to the Supreme
They have
Court
it in
and I'm out of
Oklahoma.
line, or if I've broken the law, they can
They have it
order
in
me to be thrown.
departments. In sports arenas, they have it. If you're out,
They-
if you're drunk and out of control.
Well, they don't have the authority to throw me in jail. They have that they can call. They can have police attend and have a drunken, disorderly person removed, and then the courts deal.
And it's in Philadelphia.
But they don't pass sentence. They file a complaint. There's a difference.
Yes.
You can file a complaint, but they don't have the
all I'm
authority
after-
to enforce.
All I'm after, Rick, is that there is this system. It's been here since 1607. A private corporation called the Virginia Company was wound up and started again as the Hudson's Bay Company of Rupert
I understand.
Slade.
Yeah, and
then-
Hudson's
then
Bay
when-
Company was a company. It was a company, and
No,
it had.
issued under letters patent. Okay,
Yeah.
the BNA Act. The Queen came here with Pierre Trudeau and
Yeah.
issued letters patent. But those are not valid laws here unless Rick Walker consents and wants to invest a little money or his traffic tickets in the court system. But the other people born here on Turtle Island, and that's what UNDRIP is protecting, everybody who's here, there's no definition of who's indigenous. If you self-determine as being indigenous to this country, they cannot arrest you.
Well,
You-
again,
you-
I mean,
you-
but you know, I think you're misinterpreting things because, the government does not need your consent in order to enforce law.
That's not the law. Yes, the international law.
No. No.
Is there chat on here? I'll put it in. Is there a chat?
No,
It's RV Days Hotel, paragraph 68. Indigenous common law is presumed to continue in this country. You are under Indigenous law since 1867, or not before that, 1774, when George brought the Quebec Act to Montreal and Quebec City, and spread out from there.
It's not accurate because
these are letters patent.
it's not accurate because in Canada our system is based not they don't need individual consent to in order to enforce the law. No, because our system is based on even social contract.
Ottawa is that's right. Now
That's right.
it's a
Okay,
social-
and that is to say
he doesn't want to go under Indigenous law. I understand that. He wants to go under Supreme Court of Canada, corporate Dun and Bradstreet law of Home Depot and Costco and Lowe's.
See,
you want to go into that system, but you can't say that both aren't still here because Supreme Court of Canada has conceded this.
No.
It's been the law here since 1774.
You cannot. This argument doesn't stand up because I don't care. Like it, I doesn't. Because if you follow this logic, I could walk out into the middle of the street, pull out a gun, and blow somebody's head off. And when they come to arrest me, I go, I don't consent. I'm not part of your system.
You're going to be under Indigenous common law, and a great point, because they just
now suddenly there's coercion involved, isn't there? Because what if I don't consent to that?
No, you're under Indigenous common law. It's a whole different.
What's that?
way of thinking.
Oh, is it?
The United
No, it sounds
States,
very much like now suddenly somebody wants justice, okay? Because I just blew somebody's head off.
But yeah,
but I don't consent.
There was murder. There was murder here before. No,
Right.
You don't consent to an act passed in England. It's on the other side of the world. You don't consent to an act passed over there, but you will consent. You have to consent to Indigenous common law being born here. Now, the McGirt case in the United States in 2019 said if Rick
Well, what's the real question then here, Glenn? Is it that, are you saying Indigenous common law is the law of the land, and the Canadian system is not the law of the land, is what you're trying to assert?
Brought here by settlers that you can consent to, you can agree to with your birth certificate, and go under that system and get some credit, or you can go under the Indigenous system, which is just starting out afresh now, because
that's true.
Trudeau consented in 2016. He consented.
Yes.
He consented to having UNDRIP entrenched in the Constitution of Canada.
Yes, that's true.
Where your Bill of Rights, your Charter of Rights is not entrenched, and that's why Trudeau could run over those convoy protesters, because they were under the Charter. Section 35 is part of the Constitution, and Section 52 states clearly, Section 35, supreme law in this land. But the judges, the white judges, don't want any part of that crap. They want to go back on the Supreme Court. I say leave them there. But you have a choice to go either way. You used to have a chance here to go under common law of England, or you could go under equity. And equity always trumped the common law of England. And our Indigenous laws.
So we have seen the federal government and Justice Minister Lametti, David Lametti, was about a year ago, maybe now, they announced the dual legal system, where they, because of UNDRIP, they're integrating an alternative legal path within the Canadian system, which is based on UNDRIP. So
that's called the law. That's called the law of slow transformation.
That's true.
That is not international law. Wait.
Right, but sure.
Hey, Rick,
go ahead.
Rick, what's happening? And when we first talked, 2 months ago, we were worried about, and Canadians are worried about, the Indigenous people stealing their land. Number one, if you own a house in where you live in Chatham or wherever you are, if you own a house under fee simple, the Crown owns that land, because the Mohawk that came here from New York State, they're not from Canada, they're from New York State. They trespassed into Brantford and into Montreal. They offered a contract to the Crown to give them a tenancy. That's all they had, Rick. They didn't own the land here in, call it Canada. Okay? So the Mohawk offered this fee simple, where Rick agrees to do what? Pay fees until he's dead. And so that's the system that was set up by a trespassing Mohawk, the losers from the Revolutionary War, right? And the British losers from the Revolutionary War came here and saddled the Canadians with this debt. And now I'm saying that the four eastern provinces were corporations. It's the Mercer case, and now every province to the west, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, they came in under contracts. And Lametti, I think 2 years ago, Lametti threatened Alberta to take away their contract to extract those resources. And I'm saying, forget the murderous extraction, do a new financial system that Warren Buffett said, hey, stupid, monetize the resources in the ground, every Canadian's share.
Okay, slow down again. Back to the Mohawks.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to make that to to characterize it in quite the way that you have. I wouldn't say they're trespassing here or that they trespassed. Yes, no, because yes, they fought. Some of the Mohawks fought with the British in the Revolutionary War, and when the Americans were successful, some of them came up here, and so they've settled here. And no, they're not trespassing. No, they were welcomed here. They were allowed to come here. Yes, and they came up here, and they came here, and because we have to also understand that because they are First Nations people, and we in Canada have been a country of compromise and negotiation rather than go to war. We enter into things like treaties. So
because we're young people.
Well, I can't change the past, but to say that they're trespassing is not true. That there were agreements in play made that said you can stay here. Okay, that's basically what it comes down to. And because after evaluation, the conclusion was they deserve and have the right to be there because
you consented to that. Rick Walkers consented to having the Queen come onto unceded land in Ottawa. Toronto's unceded, Vancouver's unceded, Montreal's unceded. Every major area of Canada is unceded. And Rick Walker, because he's getting paid cha-ching or whatever he's doing, making systems.
And again, I mean, it depends on how you define the word conquer.
Well, no, the Supreme Court said twice in De Sotel paragraph 30 and the Haida case 2004 paragraph 25, they said clearly Indigenous people in this country were never conquered. So acts passed in England are only valid over a conquered people in Guam somewhere.
But this is to say that the only way to resolve conflict is through military coercion. And I would say no, and that because that hasn't been the Canadian way, and thank God for that.
That's what George Washington did. George Washington murdered the Indigenous people.
Here in Canada, Sir John A. looked at what was going on down in the United States and said, when the American Revolutionary War was going on, he said, we can't have that here, so we need to come up with other solutions.
He murdered Louis Riel, who stood up for the Canadian people.
Well, you can.
He murdered them, and he murdered him. He didn't try him.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News.
I'm thinking, might not be what everybody thinks. I'm thinking there are a lot of things that there are a lot of reasons why it's not nearly as bad as people are asserting. But I could get into that more. And it's because the U.S. economy is no longer just the U.S. economy. It's because it really is the global economy. And so everything is integrated into it. And so even though the size of the debt seems massive, which it is, there's an immense amount of productive capacity there. And technology is on the cusp of exponential growth, which will fuel massive increases in scales of economy and productivity, which will help us grow out of this because, at exponential rates.
No. You can grow the economy by having 5 presidents in a row print $5 trillion, print it. Each term. In each term since 2005, $5 trillion has been printed. You can print your way out of the economy, but you can grow it. But you have to buy oil. You have to buy oil as of June 9th of this year.
Okay, so go back to your oil-rich nation in Norway there, and tell me more about the Norwegian.
No, let me finish. You've got to buy your oil in Russian currency.
Right.
Now
you don't have to.
Yes, you can't buy Saudi Arabia oil. All the Arabian OPEC countries, you've got to buy it now in Russian rubles under BRICS, yuan, currency, digital, whatever the crap is they're selling. That's what but the point is, all the countries of the world since 1944 have had to hold U.S. dollars to buy oil to heat their houses around the world. Now, nobody wants the U.S. debt. They're screwed. I lived there 40 years. I'm half American. I guess I'm half Canadian. I'm 69 years old. So I've lived in both countries half my life. My children in trouble down there. We're in big trouble because the U.S., you no longer buy oil as of June in U.S. dollars. You buy it in Russian rubles. This is a communist country. These are not fun people. These are not fun people. And so Canada has to close its borders, create its own financial system, which we've done under UNDRIP. We've already done this. Our computers are all set up. Every Canadian, Rick, would get $18 million U.S. in a reserve account.
Well, okay, but Glenn, this is pretty dark.
No.
Right now, you do not need to buy oil from Saudi Arabia in rubles. You don't need to. No, you don't. I just looked it up.
Wait, shall we go on it now? Go on tomorrow. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Let me finish my point.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I just found out from a central downtown London banker. I said before, there's a London, Greater London, and there's the Square Mile. And this genius of a fellow taught us that he talked to a very central banker in London. When you open an account, Rick, okay, and you got $1,000, you get a savings maybe or a checking, right? If you have if Rick Walker has $5 million, he's offered the third option, no one's ever heard of, the reserve account. Now, when Rick puts his $5 million, because he's really making good money, he's a good guy, right? He puts his $5 million in. Once Rick spends the $5 million in the reserve account, how much is left? In the world economy now, in the world economy of Basel, Switzerland, how much does Rick have left in the $5 million reserve account?
We jumped over into this. So I kind of was not catching you at the beginning of what you were saying. So I apologize. Can you please walk me through this again?
We're saying under the new Indigenous financial system in Canada, which we've already set up, it's called Tumult, the Mother Lode Trust, because the grandmothers and clanmothers of this country have always owned de jure, the lawful owner. They're not the de facto crown owner of the military that came from England. They are the lawful owners, 10,000 years. So we set up an account that everybody has $18 million. I thought this is kind of crazy, but we'll do it anyway. Then I found out that the central bank that's in downtown London, if Rick has 5 million, he can open up, he can check the box for a reserve account where there's $5 million reserved for Rick, because he's proven he can either steal or earn 5 million. After Rick spends the 5 million, how much is still left?
Well, I would say zero, but you're not gonna say that's the case.
He told me, I can't give his name on this call, but he told me, this guy was a genius. He was given a scholarship to Oxford when he was 7 years old. He said he didn't take their bait. He wanted to find out what was really going on. The banker told him in London, it's a reserve account for Rick Walker. He's always got 5 million, but he'd better shut his mouth and keep going, buying yachts and homes and business. And that's the top 1% how they live. And I think it's high time that Canada says, BS, we've got 700 trillion. UNDRIP gives us the right to have our own financial system and not borrow money from the United States or from Europe. And so
tell me the mechanics behind how that's supposed to work.
Same as central bank in downtown London. You would have $18 million in reserve in your computer right now. You could open an account right now for $55. I don't want you to do that. Rick and I can do it. I'll let you do it. So you don't have any money. But 100 people did pay the $55 to test the system of the computers, and they're working. So we will put in there $18 million in every Canadian's account, 700 trillion, because we say it's worth that, not Warren Buffett, not the head of the central bank in the United States, not Rockefeller. We say how much this is worth. This is our system. And so everybody gets 18 million, and you can never lose the 18 million. In our system, there's only credits, because the only wealth ever created, and this is Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, 1750, the international text for the last 300 years. Only Rick Walker's work tonight on the show, let's say he made $1,000 tonight. Only Rick's labor creates wealth. So in our system, there's only credits. In the London, Basel, Switzerland, there's only debt. And Canadians can quickly get out of debt, pay off their mortgage, and let's go. In our system, if Rick sells me his car, let's say it's worth 40 grand. Rick had to work hard to earn the 40 grand. I had to work hard to get the 40 grand. Okay? Now we go to the shopping mall and we trade 40 grand checks, right? You license and both people get a credit of 40 grand. And that credit is double reported into the pool that Basel, Switzerland has. We're just doing the same thing. Has a pool of money.
Where does the pool of money come from?
In our computers. And that pool.
So you're just creating money out of nothing. You're printing money.
And that's what Pierre Poilievre said in his speech about 3 years ago on the Parliament floor. He said they're printing money out of thin air. I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Well, sure. Yeah, it's a figure of speech. Yeah.
No, that's not a figure of speech. No,
yeah, and they are. And when they do that, what's the result of money printing?
Inflation.
Right.
Inflation. And we're saying, screw that. I'll show you an economy. If Rick can go buy yachts and cars and houses and go on trips, and they're all credits, and we're double reporting it in the pool. Let me finish. In the pool, so the 4 billion people in Palestine, let's say, or Guam or Bangladesh, who have nothing, they can access the Canadian tumult pool of the clan mothers of this country, because they are the Saudi Arabians. They are the real Saudi Arabians of the world, with mothers with a heart to feed the children around the world who are starving. And that Rick is our destiny. I don't know about in Chatham, those people born there. Canada's destiny, we're the richest country in the world in minerals. Our destiny when we started the show.
So you're promising people basically you'll own everything and be happy and not really have to work.
You'll own it. I said you don't own your house. The crown owns the land under your house. You have fee simple estate title.
But under your economic system, under
you already
Timon-
own it. You already own it. No, you already own the land under your house. An indigenous common law that's been the law since 1774, according to the Supreme Court of Canada in Des Hotel, paragraph 68, indigenous common law, you've always owned the land that you were born on. Hello, if you're German, you own the land in Germany. Only the British Crown thinks this way, and we've fallen for this for 400 years.
Well, I do own my house, and I do. Yes, I do. Now, it's fee simple. I do have to pay my taxes. And that's where you're saying that I don't own the land. And then you would also point to things like eminent domain and say that at any time the government could come and take my land. And that is actually kind of true, but they also in our system that is true, but under our system, if they want to build a highway through my living room, they do provide
the lithium factory
compensation.
in Kitchener, near where you live, the lithium factories in the fields around Kitchener, they're threatening them with eminent domain. If Rick was born in Iran and effed off to Australia for 30 years and screwed up, went home, Rick still owns his land.
But those eminent domain is in place in society because sometimes for the greater good of society, government needs to assert some control over things to get things done for the greater good of the people. And I don't like government overreach, but if they need to build a highway someplace or even a pipeline, they can invoke things to get things done.
What's wrong with going instead to Ottawa on unceded land or Toronto on unceded land? What's wrong with going to an Indigenous council where everybody wins? Nobody gets up from that table until everybody wins.
Well, sometimes it's hard to get people to agree on things.
Have you been to an Indigenous council?
I wouldn't say that I've been in an Indigenous council. No. I mean, I've dealt with First Nations peoples. I've covered many stories and spoken to them. Yeah. I've had lots.
First Nation, that term is corporations. You've been to an elected sub-Trudeau government corporation, elected.
Well, you're trying to indoctrinate me into your way of thinking.
No. All the First Nations in this country, including Casino Rama, they have surrendered to Trudeau and signed a contract to get cha-ching, right? To share the resources.
Well, they are nations within a nation. They are nations within a nation, and even there, they are not. And even you can say even that the municipality here is a corporation. It is. There are reasons for that.
Who controls your municipality? Do you know? Who controls your municipality?
Well, in what sense do you mean control?
Globally, it's called UNDRIP. Have you ever heard of UNDRIP?
No, I haven't heard of UNDRIP. I'm not familiar with what you're talking about.
I'll send it to you. UNDRIP is the 1929 program at the before the UN, but under the Vatican. I'm Catholic. I can say this. When they crashed the market in 1929 with Joe Kennedy, was paid by the Vatican to crash the market. They invented or created UNDRIP, where they would take and they would put every town in Canada, let's say, under municipality. In my hometown of my grandmother, who's Métis, in North Bay, there are 3 municipalities within 5 miles. It's all municipal controlled by somebody that you're not aware of, instead of controlled by the people.
Well, I'm reserving comment on that until I educate myself on what it is you're talking about.
If Rick had 18 million,
okay,
and he wanted to fund the police department in Chatham, Ontario, he could fund it, and he would still have 18 million if we use the downtown.
I would argue that what you're suggesting here is destined to disaster in terms of an economic system for a whole bunch of reasons. But is this what you're talking about here? I just went and Googled it.
That's Tumult. Yeah.
Okay, so that's your thing, and
It's not my thing.
and I'm sorry, whose thing is it?
It was created by the Clan Mothers.
Okay, by the Clan Mothers.
I'm
So
the
this is, but
Attorney
this is what you're
General.
talking about. This is what I mean. You're
I'm
talking
the-
about
I'm the
this.
I'm the Attorney General,
Uh-huh.
right, of the law system, the tribunal that monitors complaints in the system. But
Right.
the chief justice of that system was who? Wabiska Mokwa.
Mm-hmm.
He was the chief justice of that financial system. Because we've separated that from the courts. We've separated the finances from the courts.
Yeah. Well,
And this operates
so let me
under-
just back up here a little bit again so that we can look at this in a clearer way.
Mhm.
This idea, tumult, is, if I'm hearing you correctly, based on the idea, at least, or concept of the Norwegian Sovereign Fund.
Yes.
Now, the Norwegian Sovereign Fund, you're saying, is what? Just money that is from oil.
That was a tax on oil. Yeah.
And so how does the Sovereign Fund work, in your view?
Canadians own each.
No, I'm
Canadian-
talking about the Norwegian
the
Sovereign
Norwegian
Fund.
Well, the government there, they agree that the central government controls the investment of it on behalf of the people into
Right.
the EU stock market.
Right.
But
Okay.
Rick Walker is not involved in the decision. Whereas
Right.
in Tumult, Rick has his 18 million, which he
Okay.
can never lose, and he can start investing his money where Rick says, and not where the central government in Toronto or Ottawa says.
Okay.
You decide where you're putting it.
Sure. So, but the thing is, right, the Norwegian Sovereign Fund is then, in essence, no, it just is an asset management fund.
Under that system, yes. Great.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. So they're taxing the oil, or they're actually taxing the company, the corporation that is extracting and processing the oil at a rate of, you're saying 25%, which doesn't really matter. For the sake of argument, we'll say 25. And then they're taking that money, but the real wealth over time comes from the investments through the asset management fund, which is
in a currency system, a stock market.
yeah. So it's no different. It's no
No.
different than. Sir, go ahead. I didn't
We've
mean to
gone to the
interrupt you.
next step of what Warren Buffett said to do. Hey, stupid, monetize the resources in the ground where they can't be stolen. That's
Yeah,
what
but
we've gone to the
well,
next step.
they're actually not monetizing it in the ground. They're monetizing it when the value is added upon extraction.
That's what we're doing.
So
actually,
that's
we went
that's
to
what
the
they're
next
doing.
step.
And they're adding, and they're see what they're doing is they're assuring value over time by investing in a diverse portfolio of stocks or other financial securities or investments.
Until the Basel system collapses. And it's going to collapse now because the Basel bankers owe the depositors $2,500 trillion. They said it last year. I can send it to you. They've
Sure.
admitted they owe the depositors $2,500 trillion. They
Well,
haven't got it.
You, I mean,
Wait.
Yeah.
We're about to put the deposit in Switzerland of all the depositors in the world. We're
Mhm.
about to put that into Tumult.
well,
Raising the pool from 700 trillion plus 2,500 trillion.
Okay,
We'd have
so-
3.2 thousand trillion in our trust fund because we say it's there, not Basel, Switzerland in Europe. Canadians say it's there. Now let's go. Now let's
Okay.
back by the resources.
but
of
right,
Canada.
but the value can't be liquefied unless you extract those resources and sell them.
No.
And
no.
yes,
No,
yes.
you need computers. What do you need gold for? Fillings in your teeth. Gold is good for some material wealth in commercial practicality, but you don't need that much. The lithium craze has gone.
You're talking about what you're saying. Why do you need gold as like to back up your currency? You mean as if you were back on the gold standard? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, well, that's where they're going. That's where they're going. If people know what happened, and let's go to it. Let's go to Malaysia Air 370 and what Boyd.
No. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole tonight because that's a whole other ball of wax.
No. What we're going to is the fact
I don't. No, Glenn. Let's get through this.
I'm saying to you, what they did is they took 55,000 tons of gold from the Shah of Iran. They melted it down in Perth, Australia, at the World.
Well, you did tell me this on the phone the other day, but we don't know if this is true.
I'm suggesting to you, whatever they're doing, they're not giving up, and they're putting their gold behind their gold-backed digital currency. But that doesn't help Rick Walker. Rick Walker does not own that bank. He's a depositor only. If he doesn't play by their rules, they're going to turn off his computer.
The point here is the Norwegian Sovereign Fund generates ongoing wealth, and what it really is it's they use it to fund their retirement plans for their country, and they do that by investing the money, just like any kind of retirement fund would, essentially. It's really no different than what BlackRock does, because BlackRock is just an asset management company. So in Norway, they're taking 25% of the oil revenue, if it's 25, and then they invest it in the markets, and they generate revenue from that, which they then distribute to people as a pension fund. And the reason they do that is because they know eventually the oil will run out, and they want to make sure that they have security. And they want to make sure that there's security there and even if it doesn't run out, they want to make sure that they have security for their citizens. And this is actually no different than what is done in actually quite a number of resource-rich countries, especially oil-rich countries like Qatar, where they have sovereign wealth funds, and they do essentially the same sort of thing, where they use funds from the oil revenue, a portion of that, and then they invest it into diversified assets to bolster the government budget. That's what they're doing. And then that creates, because they're not just corporations, they have obligations to their citizens, and in order to meet those obligations, they're investing the money in other things. Now, the Canadian government could do similar things, and I don't know if maybe they aren't already in ways that I'm not aware of. But this particular system that you're suggesting is going to unfold here. You're not. There's no real mechanism in here for the addition of value to the resource. You're saying it's just worth money sitting in the ground.
Wait, that's the bulwark. That's the bulwark.
That doesn't work, but that does not work.
Labor creates wealth.
No, yeah.
You get 18 million. You get 18 million under this system. Now, Rick's labor. You can't.
Well, that's a hell of a communist style promise. It's like utopia and free money for everybody. But anyway, I get the idea. But
what's communist about it?
Well, because it's a collectivist, it's about nationalizing the resource for starters, okay? And then you're taking it a step further and saying, everybody, we're just going to take this big pie and divide it all up equally, and you all get $18 million. And then
as a reserve, so you can live calmly.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't matter how much you spend. You've always got $18 million, which means that it's free money for everybody to buy whatever you want.
But the central bank in London works.
It does not work that way. No, it doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't. I do know that. I do know that, because even if they wanted it to work that way, Glenn, it couldn't work that way, because they're governed whether they like it or not. Even if you are dealing with a centrally planned economy that is entirely controlled by government, ultimately, in the end, they are governed by the laws of economics, which is to say, yes, it is. You cannot, because if all you do is just give people free money, it makes things worth.
Free money. Let's
It
slow
makes
down. Let's
it makes the money worth zero.
One step at a time. Who controls the decisions in the small city of London, the square mile?
It doesn't. I'm talking about your system or this tumult system, which is you're saying that for $55 you're going to give people 18 million. Units.
Based on their birthright. Based on the birthright. The small city of London is controlled.
You said $18 million.
The small city of London is controlled by the mayor of London.
Yeah.
And the King Charles or Queen Elizabeth, when she goes in there, she bows to the mayor of London.
Blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about the economic system itself. I'm talking about tumult. This won't, it cannot work.
It's the same system.
It's not the same
They're
system.
printing it up for their friends.
No,
We're going to print it up for ours.
even as we sit here, there are limits to how much they can print. Now they are printing far more than they should.
There's no limit.
Yes, there is. Yes, there absolutely is.
BlackRock has $10 trillion in their vault. There's no limit to how much. There's no limit, Rick. Where's the limit?
The limit is what the market can bear. And when the market is oversaturated with money, and you've said this yourself in a roundabout way, if you print too much money, you get inflation. If you get too much inflation, the money becomes worthless. Pretty soon you're taking wheelbarrows full of money to buy a loaf of bread. So they're governed by the markets themselves, by market dynamics, by the rules of economics, the laws of economics. They can't escape it. So they're governed by that alone. And then they always analyze, try to figure out how much money they should print, how much money they should borrow, where they have to sit in debt versus GDP. You have to have a certain amount. You have to have growth. You have to have certain productive output to match the amount of currency that goes into the system. And the reason you pay these economists at these central banks and at the Bank of International Settlements to produce all these reports and produce all of these and to make these recommendations. And the reason these banks operate, central banks operate even at arm's length from government, is because they need to make very delicate decisions on how much they're going to print, borrow, so that they inject stability into the markets. So people say, well, inflation is bad, but inflation is not entirely bad. Inflation properly managed is necessary to ensure liquidity of currency within the market itself, in order to make sure that there's always enough currency out there so that when as we talked earlier, if I extend 30 days credit to you to pay for, maybe I make you a website, and you need to pay for that in 30 days. There needs to be enough money in the system that it flows through and eventually finds its way to you. So the economy is liquid enough so that I get paid. But if they don't print enough money, that's when things begin to collapse. So yes, that's part of it. Now that's only one element or one dynamic element of the inflation process. There are other things that can come into play, but this is why you're paying the big bucks to some of these economists to make these delicate decisions. They need to make sure that things are stable. Now, the BRICS does represent a major threat to the Western economy, because this is economic warfare, essentially, is what they're waging, and they want to unseat the U.S. as the dominant economy, and they want to de-dollarize, de-US dollarize the world so that it's no longer the world reserve currency. And I get it, but
who controls the BRICS nations? Who controls that currency? Do you know?
The
Central Bank of London. The Central Bank of London. The Bank of Beijing is the Central Bank of London. It's all Rothschild.
Oh, for crying out loud. Here, it's the Rothschilds. Here we go.
Well, of course it is. Since Napoleon's lost the War of Waterloo, it's been the Rothschilds in the East Coast.
So you're right on this level. Okay. What the rude awakening for the BRICS nations is this: as much as they think that they're going to, that they are clever in that they are asserting themselves in this way. But at the end of the day, the BRICS nations, okay? Xi Jinping, Putin, Brazil, Russia. Yeah, there's more. Yeah, I understand. There's a bunch of them.
Including Cuba.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Yeah, and they're lining up against the West, and this is all part of World War III. I totally get it. But here's the rude awakening for them. They're so integrated into what we're doing that if they take us down economically, they're taking themselves down too. Because China, for instance, is so heavily integrated into our economy over here in the West, especially in Canada and the US, that they don't want to destroy what they have here. They hold tons of our debt. So they can't afford to have us collapse.
And nobody wants it.
No, they have it. Whether they like it or not, they already hold it. They already hold our debt.
It's a fiction. It's a fiction. They have
It's
gold.
not a fiction.
They have physical gold.
No, because things have to get paid for it now. With even if there is a stock market crash, hopefully it's not too severe, but these end up being corrections, and often, and in many respects, crashes are opportunities. But you go ahead.
Stock market crash because Warren Buffett just sold another $100 billion worth of Bank of America. We saw that. Now, if Rick loses $1 billion in the stock market, instead of jumping out of the window, that $1 billion loss is a credit in tumult backed by our resources.
Yeah, but see,
the buying power of the Canadian public.
It's misleading. Because it doesn't reflect the true nature of economic laws.
You'd rather have $1 billion loss in a system in Wall Street that you don't control.
You cannot just give people free money.
They do it at the bank.
But
$1 million loan.
But the point is, if you just give people free money, then the next batch of free money they give you isn't worth as much as the free money that you lost. The more currency you put out, the less it's worth. And at the end of the day, you still need productive output, because at some point, Glenn, it's at some point, whatever it is that you're using, in this case, the resources of Canada, okay? If you're backing it up with the resources of Canada,
initially real,
then at some point, they have to be used.
No.
You're saying to just stay there and they don't do anything, but then they have no real value. In which case, you can't back up anything with it.
Only Rick's labor, physical labor, he creates a pair of moccasins, he runs a podcast. But if Rick has the next great idea, okay, the next intellectual property, he's the Elon Musk or Joe Biden of the intellectual world, and he thinks this thought, where do you record it? If you put it in Washington, D.C., Library of Congress, they'll steal it, Rick. They'll steal it. If you put it in tumult, it goes into your computer and is protected by indigenous common law, protects Rick's idea.
You're saying that, you're trying to tell me that regardless of what happens in market dynamics, that the money that you're getting through tumult is always worth the same amount. And that's not true. It can't be true, because it's impossible to be true, because currency, and tumult currency in this case, is going to fluctuate regardless of what it has to.
It only goes up. It only goes
up.
Yes.
Nothing only ever goes up. What goes up must come down.
It is now. We used to, a chocolate bar was 5 cents when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
5 cents. Today it's $3.
Mm-hmm.
A house was $26,000.
But that's not, yes, Glenn, that's true on the surface. But in real terms, in terms of real value, it's only worth as much as it ever was. A candy bar is worth a candy bar. A suit of clothes is worth a suit of clothes. An ounce of gold is worth basically what it has always bought. If you look historically, that's why they peg things at the price of gold. Just because, see, that's why you adjust things for inflation when you look at the true value of things. So a car that I'm paying $30,000 for today, back 20 years ago, might have only cost $3,000. But back in those days, people were making less money per hour. Other things cost different prices.
But the top 1% now own, whatever verb you want to use, they control 90% of the world's wealth. 8 billion people are disenfranchised under your system.
My system, well,
your Western system at the Swiss bank in Switzerland, run by the Vatican, by the way.
I don't care. You know what? At the end of the day, I don't care what system you want to point to.
But 1% own it, and the rest of us are poor.
Market forces, supply, demand.
Not market forces. It's a rigged game where the top 1% get the loans from BlackRock and whatever else went on in COVID when they made all that money in the vaccines.
BlackRock is pension funds. BlackRock, people don't even, BlackRock has become this big, evil corporate boogeyman, and especially people on the left have been using to just scare the hell out of people. BlackRock is an asset management company.
They're buying up the farms of the Ukraine, of the breadbasket.
Okay, that's actually a freaking lie. And I've shown that here on the show. There is legislation in Ukraine that actually prevents that. It's a lie. It's a flat out 100% freaking lie. And RFK Jr. keeps repeating it because he's a freaking moron or a propagandist. I haven't figured out which, but it's a lie because a lot of people want Ukraine to lose and they want the West to lose. So they keep churning this thing, and some people keep repeating it, but it is not true. Yeah, there are some investments there, but they have laws in place in Ukraine to prevent foreign ownership of the land, specifically the farmland, because it has always been the breadbasket of that part of the world. In fact, I think it accounts for 10 or 15% of all grain production for the entire world. Why the hell do you think Putin wants it? That's why. And Ukraine ain't going to give that up. They will take investment, but they will not sell it off. They will allow some leasing over periods of time. And right now they do need capital injections because they need money. So you do have some U.S. companies going in there, and they are investing through lease, not ownership, of some of that farmland. But these assertions that BlackRock is going up there like carpetbaggers and stealing the land for pennies on the dollar is a fucking lie. And I'm sick of hearing about it because it's not fucking true.
But can you disagree with me? The top 1% in the world of people.
Well, that's it. I don't
control over 90% of the wealth.
No question, especially during the pandemic, we saw a big transfer of wealth from the middle class to the upper class. I don't know what the exact stats are. I hear a lot of things. I'm very reluctant to latch on to any of those numbers here tonight, especially though doing more research, because I hear that stuff all the time. I don't know what the exact numbers might be. 1%, 2%, at the end of the day, I don't know. But I do know what really ultimately matters is what is the standard of living for people overall. And we have seen a hollowing out of the middle class. No question about that. But that is because we've allowed jobs to be offshored. We've allowed these big companies to, go overseas to places like China and Thailand and Vietnam and wherever and produce in factories where they're paying people less, the safety standards are low, and then they ship the cheap crap back here and we finance that.
But no return on them buying up Canadian resources and getting a return to the Canadian people. And that's why we're poor and the richest country in the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, Canada should be much wealthier. I'll agree with you on that. And we should be using our resources more. And yes, it should be used in a way to benefit people. And I think that we should be adding more value to our resources, not just pulling it out of the ground and shipping it to some other country. We should be turning those resources into other products here. Our lumber, let's make furniture out of it, or our steel, let's make steel and turn those into automobiles that we sell all around the world. those things also. But this is
if they had an $18 million nest egg,
well,
groceries for life. They have a house.
That's utopia, and
because the Earth or the flat Earth, whichever one it is, this is a wealthy planet of abundance.
Sure, but Glenn, here
but the bankers, the central bankers have
there are huge problems with what your system is, and I hate to keep saying it's your system. Whoever system created that thing, I don't want to pin everything on you, but I see huge problems with it. Not the least of which is there's no incentive to work.
There is, because there are like in welfare state. There's always bums sitting on the sofa eating bonbons and watching sports, right?
Yeah, if you got 18 million bucks, why go to work?
Always those people. At least they'll be off the street, and there's going to be no tent cities in downtown Vancouver. But most Canadians, I give more credit for. We are very smart, well-educated people. You'll only sit on the sofa for about a week, and then you start going squirrely.
No.
And then you go. What I love doing is designing and building houses.
It's like universal basic income. It will not work. It doesn't work because it creates a disincentive to work. Why go to work if you got this? It's a lot of people won't, and people will maybe say, "I want my UBI." Yeah, but that also contributes to inflation when people are getting UBI, especially if they don't work, because now you're getting money with no productivity on the other side. Money out and nothing, money and given to someone for nothing just creates inflation because it creates demand with no productive output. You have to have corresponding productivity in order to
but you don't
keep
get any
the economy
more.
in balance.
You don't increase that from 18 million unless you're out doing something.
And if you give 18, and here's the thing, Glenn, if you give $18 million to everybody, you know what it's worth? Zero.
18 million.
No, it's worth nothing.
No, against the central bank in London.
It's worth nothing.
In London and Switzerland.
If you just give $18 million to everybody,
US $18 million.
It's not really worth anything. It's worth very little.
These fat cat aristocrats of Europe.
Do you know what happened? What would happen to the economy if suddenly everybody had $18 million in their bank accounts?
I'll show you an economy. If people can go shopping and have a credit when they get home,
it would be devastating. It would be devastating to the economy.
Let's have Parliament pass this, or the Indigenous.
Oh my God!
And
you're not thinking it through.
Well, we can't buy houses now. Who can afford $1 million?
Oh, no doubt, no question about it. Trudeau's messed up the housing market, no question about it.
A friend of mine makes $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
He just borrowed $1.2 million.
Yeah.
He's going to be in debt.
Why is that? And why do you think that is?
He hopes to God.
Why are housing prices like this?
He hopes that the value goes up. If it crashes, he's screwed. He's screwed. He has bankruptcy. If the house goes from 1.2 million down to 800,000, that's a credit, because he worked for 10 years to make that payment on that mortgage. When I found out, Rick, that a mortgage, I paid $160,000. I got a $160,000 mortgage, and in 10 years, I paid off $3,000 on a 30-year amortization. I was so mad. Are you crazy? That's fraud. Well, they're all interest loaded. They're all upfront interest loaded.
Yeah, they've extended to 30 years now in order to try to make it affordable for people. So they amortize it over an extra 10 years, which is, it's not really a good thing.
Under our systems, he's born on Turtle Island. He's born on Turtle Island, Western Hemisphere. He gets $18 million nest egg. Now let's see what he does with it. He's a smart guy. He'll probably still keep.
What's the drug addict downtown living in the tent going to do with his $18 million?
Hopefully he'll stop, or he'll kill himself.
Right. I think probably the latter.
Okay. Well, then he's gone off to the next dimension.
Yeah. All kinds of problems that are, unforeseen here, unintended consequences of giving everyone $18 million for nothing.
You've got the OxyContin problem.
And then there's the larger question of, and then there's the larger question of this, like, who gives right now? You've got this, it just comes to mind. You've got this website up, and you're telling people that they can pay, what is it, $55?
You keep 25 in our trust fund.
Okay.
$30
So,
goes to the
but here's the thing,
like a bank, but there's no bank fees. There's no.
Okay, but here's my question to you. What land do you actually own?
Canadians own it as a community.
Says who right now?
People born here. Our Indigenous law.
Yeah,
Indigenous common law is the law of this land, not British common law.
Okay, but
London.
is
Indigenous
there?
common
That's what you're saying. That's your.
That's the law. No,
well,
that's the
so you
law.
say.
You haven't
But
studied it.
what are you
Yeah.
going to do? So what are you going to do? Because the Canadian says the Canadian Shield. What are you going to do if some guy's got a house sitting on a piece of the Canadian Shield and
He owns
somebody?
it. He owns
Well,
it.
is it he own that little piece, or does he own some other piece? Here's the thing, Glenn. I don't think you have the authority, as I sit here tonight thinking about it. I don't think you own anything, and so I don't think it's really legal for you to be selling anything.
Legal, it's lawful. Legal is statutes.
I don't think you should be taken, honestly, like.
Let's be clear with your audience. Legal is statutes passed in London, England. They're not passed in Ottawa.
Semantics. At the end of the day.
No.
Mhm.
Ottawa is on unceded land. Parliament is on unceded land. It's subject to Indigenous common law according to the Supreme Court of the country. In
So you can argue that in court if you want to, but my guess is that if push comes to shove at some point, someone's gonna challenge what you're doing here and say Glen Bogue and whoever.
Let's do the court. UNDRIP was entrenched in the Constitution, Section 35, on the consent of Trudeau in 2016 in New York.
So you better, I would say, you better get all this settled before you start selling stuff to people.
We're not selling. We have 100 people have invested.
Before you take any money, before you take any investments of any kind from anyone.
No, we're not taking money.
You're taking $55.
From 100 people of our local community people to make sure the computer system works, and it does work. Now we've got to go.
Well, the computer system might work, but the court system might see it differently when they start looking at you taking, $55 checks from people.
Where we are, we're in courts in 5 provinces right now, fighting for the fact that Justin Trudeau consented to UNDRIP being entrenched in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And consent, according to the Hape case, I mentioned it earlier, RV Hape 43, Trudeau's consent is a limit, Rick, on sovereignty of Canada, Inc. And so...
Well, so you say, but if
Section 35 is part of the Constitution.
Well, here we are, we're having a discussion about it, and I'm questioning it. Somebody with more authority than me is likely going to question this.
Section 52 of your Constitution, Canada's Constitution, states that the laws of the Constitution are the supreme law of the land, including Section 35. It's part of the Constitution, not the Charter of Rights. So our laws, our Indigenous laws, have been the law since 1774. They are the supreme law of the land this year, right now, under the consent of Trudeau at 2016, under the world pressure to have UNDRIP entrenched in our Constitution. They agreed to do it. This protects every single Canadian baby born here.
Well, these are legal arguments that you need to prove in court.
Not legal. Not legal.
Lawful, legal, or semantics.
No.
It says, you don't have the army to back this up.
Rick, legal is statutes that came from England and are passed in
blah 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 blah. At the end of
that's unceded land. That's unceded Canadian land. So
the Ontario Securities and Exchange Commission might have something else to say about it, Glenn.
You're already registered in the Securities and Exchange Commission. They have no jurisdiction over Indigenous common law, according to the Supreme Court of this country. The Supreme Court and our Indigenous Court, which are the supreme law of the land above.
You maybe you're right, but what I'm saying is I think that you better. I would say it. No, I don't think that this is settled.
You can't get the Court of Appeal. You can't get the Courts of Appeal to say it yet. by a case called RV Montour last November.
Yeah.
Sophie Bork said in November of last year, Trudeau consented to UNDRIP being entrenched in the Constitution.
Yes.
It is the supreme law of the land. Now,
Yeah, that was the Superior Court of Quebec, and that's a case that deals with whether someone with
Mohawk, the Mohawk title.
yeah, Mohawk,
That's the
whether
Mohawk title.
whether under UNDRIP and
Mohawk title
yeah, well, whether he had to pay his taxes on tobacco, that was
from New York. From
yeah.
New York. So
Mhm.
proving that the Mohawk came from New York and they trespassed, Rick, onto your land.
Yeah.
They trespassed here, and you won't
And even
fight.
it's my understanding that even that case is being appealed.
They're always
So-
appealed, but you can't
Yeah.
appeal consent.
And that can and so that may well make its way all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada,
It's
which
already been there. It's already.
Yeah.
She quoted Haight, the Haight
Mm-hmm.
2007 Supreme Court. She said,
well,
once Trudeau he consented.
Well,
he
I'm talking-
consented to UNDRIP being entrenched. So it's over, Rick. It's once you consent, it's over. In sex, right? Once you consent, it's over.
well,
You
Bill
consent.
C-15 made entrenched UNDRIP into Canadian law.
It did. Nothing
Yeah.
delays UNDRIP. Section
Mhm.
5 of Bill C-15 says that
Yeah.
all Canadian,
But-
Canadian, wait,
but-
including the Bank of Canada, all Canadian law
Mhm.
must change to comport to Indigenous law of the people
But
born here.
but
people born
even
here.
the language,
person-
even the language of UNDRIP itself is very vague. It's a extremely poorly written document.
No,
Yes,
why
it
do you
is.
say that? No, I'm a lawyer.
Because I've read it.
No,
It's a
not at all.
mess.
The opening phrase says it's individual rights. Article 44 gives Rick and his whole family individual rights. He doesn't need any community approval from Chatham or London or Ottawa. He's an individual. The Supreme Court
And it does not. and-
Wait. In the Supreme Court's first decision, 1951, it's called the AGNS versus AGC, Lord Nelson Hotel. It's the first decision of the Supreme Court of Canada by their own, and they said
Yeah.
nothing surpasses the capacity of the individual Rick Walker. Now, what does that mean? 18 million, and let's go with Rick's brilliant mind, and let's let Rick invent things for the whole planet coming out of Canada. That's the unlimited capacity of the individual protected by UNDRIP Article 44.
It's
Let's
a
go.
very it's an
Let's
extremely poorly written document.
No,
It's already resulting in a wide range of litigation. It's
No,
go- you-
not
you-
at all.
yeah you're gonna it's
The
going to
bar
result in all
members-
kinds
the
of
bar
cases.
The bar members can't make the arguments I'm making. They'll suspend you. Well, let's
Mhm.
do a second show just on UNDRIP and how
Sure.
well written it is.
Sure.
And how it protects every Canadian's right to have their own financial system. You don't need TUMO. If you don't want TUMO, create your own. And you have a vote on it and blah, blah, blah. But don't go any further along with the Rockefeller Rothschild Bank of International Settlements from 1944 is where it had its roots. And before that,
Well,
1913.
okay,
in the United
yeah.
States. In the United States. It's not a Canadian system.
What is it here that I was reading? You're going to take the value of physical property. You're going to take the property, and then it goes. The value of your IP is automatically recorded as the general asset pool.
Your intellectual property of your idea, you
Uh-huh.
record it into TUMO, and you put a value on it. You put a value on it.
So those are like non-fungible tokens, essentially, and then and what's it backed up with?
Gold of Canada, the resources of Canada.
Yeah.
And now it's about to be backed up by the debt of the central bank in Switzerland, who can't pay back the depositors. They're screwed. You know, when the banks when Credit Suisse went bankrupt in Switzerland 2 years ago, Credit Suisse went bankrupt. The depositors lost all their money, including
The members
Sovereign
says
Fund.
here the members' capital shall be held in trust at a provincial credit union
It can be held at a credit union, yes.
or
Because the
such
credit-
other financial institution approved by the Tumult Board of
the credit
Trustees.
union- The credit unions, the credit union.
Why do you want to use a colonial banking system, Rothschilds based thing for your money?
No. The Northern Credit Union in Ontario is created by Ford's government, the Ontario government of the people. That's your mechanism to buy a can of beer at the beer store. That's the mechanism that's there. But every shareholder owns one share of the credit union. That's the same as Tumo. It's the same system. We each own one.
I don't think
share.
it's quite the same system.
It is the same system. But
the credit union didn't give me $18 million because I put 55 in.
Then you'll get 18 million. That's our system. Only the people have 18 million.
You know what they say? If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
It's indigenous. Gaddafi did it. Muammar Gaddafi did it until Hillary Clinton murdered him and his daughter. He was He was giving the people of Libya what their birthright was.
I had a feeling we were going there.
Why?
Yeah.
This is what Benjamin Franklin did. Benjamin Franklin gave the American people
Third international theory. Third international theory.
What's the third international theory?
That's Muammar Gaddafi, my friend, and that is where your socialism is, and
that's socialism.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very fascistic socialism, but it's socialism. It's the nationalization of all resources and an authoritarian dictatorship.
Where's the dictatorship? If Rick has a problem with Glen and Tumult, where does he go? He goes to a 3-judge tribunal.
Yeah, to the clan mothers who become.
No, you don't know.
So who? Yeah, it says right here. It's a board of clan mothers.
The clan mothers.
Tumult operates under the stewardship of clan mothers and in their role as trustees.
That's right. It's because they're the lawful owners. It's the Haida case, 2004 Supreme Court, paragraph 32. The Crown is the de facto owner. The grandmothers and clan mothers are the lawful owners.
Do they get paid for their participation in this as trustees?
18 million.
So they don't get any more than anybody else?
As they work and spend, they get more credits. They don't get credit. Their account goes, if they buy a car for $20,000, their account goes up by $20,000.
And it says here the members' capital shall be secured by the resources of the Canadian Shield, since the Supreme Court, blah, 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 right? So the resources, and B, the physical and intellectual property of the members. This is known as the general asset pool.
That's the asset pool. And your
the physical and intellectual property of the members. So that's
if you have a house with $1 million, you store it in your own computer. That $1 million,
and that goes into the general asset pool.
It also goes into the general asset pool for the poor people around the world. That's the rule we made. So now your house at $1 million.
So you're not putting in $55, Glenn. You're putting in $55 and everything you own
into your vault that you.
But it says it says right there it goes into the general asset pool. And you just said it's to benefit the poor people around the world. So you're backing up. You're backing up. Yes, you are. You're using your capital. You're capitalizing. If I put if I join this, you're capitalizing your system with my capital, which is my assets, which is my home and my car and everything else that I have of value.
Are in your computer.
And that's collectivism.
No, it's in your computer. You have an account number, like at CIBC. Yeah. You put your house in for $1 million, your car at 100,000 goes in there. You're at 1.1 million. That's secure in your own computer.
How is that secure?
I own. That's my.
Why do I need to put it in there at all?
Because right now, do you know what Terranet is? The Ontario Land Registry System, Terranet?
Whatever,
Terranet
okay.
Terranets are, the way we record our property in Ontario, Terranet was sold. And the lawyers who are real estate expert lawyers are the only ones that can go into the computer and steal Rick's asset. You would never know. It's called Terranet.
I don't. Well, I'm in this case. I'm not so worried about them. I'm more worried about anybody else that might be involved in this. And if this thing doesn't work and it goes bust, and then we've agreed to put my assets into the general asset pool, I could lose everything I have.
No, your title under Indigenous law, Rick Walker is not the fee simple owner. He's the autochthonous Indigenous allodial in England. Rick Walker becomes the once he puts his account, his land into this law. Listen to me. You're no longer a fee. You're a fee simple owner in their system, no problem. But you're the autochthonous absolute owner of your land in your computer. It can never be taken away from you the way it can't be taken away in Iran. Then that value is doubled to the poor people. So Rick's life asset is helping to feed
where you really don't want to invest money in a country like Libya when it's ruled by somebody like Muammar Gaddafi. And do you know why? No, but I mean that was, or in some of these other countries we've talked about, including Russia, because do you know what happens if if things go wrong? They just take it. They nationalize the ass out of it, and they take it on you.
Under this system, every Canadian, 40 million Canadians have one share, and I can't buy Rick's share. I can't get my friend. I can't get my friend, Peter and me to buy out Rick. Rick can never lose.
I don't. Explain to me again why do I have to put my car in the computer, and my house, like. Why? He says right there that your personal physical property goes into the general asset pool. That's worrisome to me.
No, you put it first into your computer where it's recorded under your number, under your social insurance number, under your bank vault number. Rick's now the banker. He controls his house forever. They can't take it away for taxes. They can't take it away for anything because we're all rich. We don't need taxes anymore. We're all rich in the Canadian Shield. Then he is.
Who picks up my garbage on Tuesday? If there's no taxation, no revenue going to the government, who's paying the guy to come around and pick up the recycling and grab my garbage on Tuesday?
I'll suggest you in a hurry. It'll be the robots.
They've
already gone.
Well, we better get the robots first because nobody's going to be working if everybody's.
I'm not sure Rick's not a really good robot. I'm not sure yet. You're very good, but you might be a robot. I'm not.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Although, did you see the other day what they call Optimus? Those robots that Elon Musk was rolling out. Did you see those things, man?
Good, right?
Yeah, really freaking good. And you're right. I mean, that's where we're going. Everyone's going to have their personal assistant as a robot. It can even just be your friend, or it can do the dishes or mow your lawn or walk your dog. And it's a real thing.
Sex at one point.
Oh my goodness.
But this is where we're going as far as the freedom. Right now into the system, most of us work. I work 80 hours a week. I work 80 hours a week, right? Either in the law or for the people, or the tea company they work with. Most people are working more than 40 hours a week, but you've got to do it. Now, what kind of a life has this been for me since I was 16 years old? I've had a great life. I was Olympian. I've done all those other things, but still, we had to work. Not we wanted to work in the fields. I was fortunate to work in the fields that I loved doing, building, being a lawyer, being an Olympian. I love those fields. Most people don't have that luxury. And this system gives them the luxury, backed by the pride of Canada, because we either are the richest country in the world or we're not. I say we are by a long shot, and this is our destiny.
Well, I understand the concept.
Good.
I don't think the way you've got the system set will work at all, and that's because it's not capitalized.
Did you know about what Boris Yeltsin did in 1993 when the Iron Curtain fell down? You know what he did, Dick? Boris Yeltsin
with regard to what?
Vodka. No, he gave the big boozer, big vodka guy. He gave the Russian people 1/3 of the Russian wealth. They
Hmm.
all got 1/3. There's a book called The Red Something. I can't think. Red. It's a world famous. It's a world famous international law case now in the end. But he gave them 1/3. Now the crazy Russians couldn't drink the bloody one certificate. They had a Canadian Tire certificate, right? They had 5 of them. Okay, so along came Solomon Brothers from New York City, and offered them 5 bottles of vodka for each certificate. And the idiots, because they didn't recognize the certificate as any value at all, they took the vodka. And Solomon Brothers made 1,000% profit in the next several years. This is the same principle. We're giving the
Well, the other thing he did,
their portion of the Canadian shit. But in our case, they can't drink it away. They can't gamble it at Woodbine Racetrack. They cannot get rid, like the Iranians, you cannot get rid of your birthright. So go around the world, Rick, do your thing, because you're really good at podcast host. You are really good. You're tougher than I thought. You're tough. But go around the world, world and do your thing. And if you F it up, you can always come back to Canada and start again. Now you've got a dynamic population, not afraid to go broke.
well, I really, 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 really want you to be my friend because I've got way too many enemies. So I hope I wasn't too tough on you tonight, man. I hope not. But I've enjoyed the conversation very much. And yeah, you come back tomorrow. We'll keep doing this. And because we do need to talk more about the UNDRIP thing, because I think we're more in alignment in many respects on that. I'm very concerned about it.
It is the top issue right now in the courts of Canada, because the judges, folks have got to know, Rick, the judges trained at the law societies that I went to are so, I'm 69, but they're my age. They don't have any idea what I'm talking about, because I was also trained under Grand Chief Wabiska and another Grand Chief in banking. And I don't know what happened to Wabiska, but I was trained to think in a way that benefits all the people of Canada. So it's all equal. That's the main thing of the Indigenous people. But now they're in First Nations where they are starving. You know, the chief makes all the money, if you know this, right? The chief makes all the money, and the people on the reserve around it, they got nothing.
That's very true.
And
yeah, changes need to be made.
We're fixing all that. We're fixing all that whole thing. We get this stinking thinking in AA, they call it, right? Where people born here, they're not Greek, they're not French, and they're not Cree or Algonquin. Those are again culture. But everybody born here under our Métis. There are 10 million Métis people in Canada, and Trudeau won't recognize one of them. 10 million. All of Quebec is Métis.
Yeah, I know it's a serious issue.
All the French went back to Paris when the British were coming. The bloody Limans were coming. They all took off back to Paris in 1763, except for the people who had children here. And we stayed. My grandfather came in 1635.
Well,
we stayed here. And now we're here to give the riches to all the people of the country.
You got to save this for tomorrow. We're going to be here till midnight. So.
Oh, no. There is that. It has to be. Holy shit.
Yeah. I go 3 hours a night usually anyway, so I'm used to this. And this has been fantastic. Actually, I've really enjoyed this. I think it's been very lively, and I think the viewers. I haven't even been looking in the chat, so I can't even see it.
Check it out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, we'll recoup and we'll come back over, especially the sovereign fund of Norway, and the central bank of downtown London is where the action is. So we'll come back.
Okay. All right, folks. And with that, we're going to sign off. I will be back tomorrow night with Glenn, 7 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, really? I'm coming back tomorrow?
Yeah, that's what you said. Do it tomorrow. Is that okay?
I'm a sprinter.
This is not. No, man. This is a marathon. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It can be another night. But I'm right into this.
No. Because November 5 is coming in the U.S. I'm telling you, we're in big doo-doo up here when the U.S. goes into cuckoo land. So let's get ready. So let's meet tomorrow night at 7 o'clock.
He was right about that. It is the U.S. has gone into cuckoo land, and looks like we might be in deep doo-doo.
obviously this was something we ran before. I wanted to share it again tonight because some things do relate. Like that was, how long ago did we do that thing with Glen Bogue now? That was almost a year ago, 10 months ago, 11, 8, 9, 10 months ago. I recued it tonight for a bunch of reasons, but I did want to share it with you guys again. Just a few things that I took note of while that was running again, my, rejigging my memory. Yeah, we've gotten into cuckoo land in the United States. We've seen that with the tariffs and Trump and his insane economic policies and picking a fight with his friends, including us. We'll see what happens in that regard tomorrow. Bank of International Settlements, just in the simplest terms, we went on a long time about that in this conversation, but Bank of International Settlements, this really just acts like a middleman for central banks around the world to build so that you have a trustworthy mechanism there. So you know that if you engage in a transaction, one bank to another, one country to another, that you're going to get paid, so that you don't send assets over here and then not get paid over there. Although the United States seems to have this ability to impose sanctions on anybody it wants, but that's because they are the bearer of the world reserve currency. That's a whole other issue. And then with regard to Libya, there is all this rhetoric and these cliches that they portray in people's minds here, certainly in some political circles, where Muammar Gaddafi was creating some sort of utopia. But if you really do the research and look at the actual empirical evidence on the numbers and the actions of Gaddafi over time, his system also began to fall apart, and it was just thick with corruption in the end. It was very authoritarian. It was a controlled economy. Yes, they were capitalizing on the oil, but in the end, a lot of even with that, because oil prices were still, it's a commodity, and it goes up and down on with the world markets. And in the end, a lot of the social programs that people talk about as though it was some utopia over there, a lot of them were underfunded, whether it was social housing or healthcare or education or any of those kinds of programs or services that Gaddafi promised the people. A lot of it fell very, very short, especially on the housing side, and it bred a lot of resentment among the people. And as time went on, he became more and more authoritarian rather than dealing with the systemic problems. He also injected more and more capitalism into the economy as things went along. And his family, he was very corrupt over time as well, skimming a lot of money. In fact, if you go back and you look at, the SNC-Lavalin scandal, all of that is really because of the corruption in Libya and places like Libya. That was people making deals with corrupt world leaders on the Canadian side in order to win international contracts. And that's all because of corruption from foreign governments. And the only way to get contracts is to buy into the corruption, to pay people off and get involved in that. That's what the SNC-Lavalin scandal was really ultimately all about. So when people sit and tell me that Libya was some utopia that Hillary Clinton undermined by having, or the United States had undermined because they took out Gaddafi, it's not quite that simple. It's very complicated. It's complex. It's corrupt. And it's an illustration, actually, of how and why a system like that ultimately didn't work. And third universal theory, or third economic theory, through Gaddafi's Green Book, which if you look into that as well, it's just almost incoherent economic policy in the end. And if you look at the reviews by some of the world's top economists, there's a pretty widespread consensus. Not that consensus is always equates to reality, but it just wasn't sound economic theory or policy in the end. And it was a country with a lot of oil, so there was a lot of wealth there to begin with. So a lot of mistakes could be made, but he was a brutal dictator. There's no question about it. I kind of view almost all world leaders as a bunch of gangsters anyway, in the end. And people just average people, we all end up paying the price sometimes, you know. I still think that we're very fortunate to live where we live today. And that's why we've got to save it, man. And I don't like what I see going on. This is not, it's not good. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. It will be a big day. Cross your fingers, hope for the best. Hope that Trump tacos out. Ultimately, he'll have to. Or we'll just become less involved. Or he'll have to show his true colors. You know what I'm saying? So just remember this. It's not our fault. It's not Canada's fault. We didn't do this. Whatever comes. And remember this. We'll survive. Whatever happens. Of that, I am confident. I'm going to take a little break. We're going to come back. Show you one more thing before we sign off tonight about Chris Cuomo. And yeah, that's it. I'll be back in a minute.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So I did stumble on this just before we began tonight's broadcast. Chris Cuomo says he's been wrong. And he didn't really say what he was wrong about, except that he was wrong about, I think, just about everything. I'll take that. I was not a Chris Cuomo fan at all. He lost me during the pandemic because he was just so hardline on the vaccinations, the mandates, the masking, all of it, and highly critical of people who, like myself, kind of stood against it. Not that he mentioned me. He probably doesn't know who I am, but I know who he is. And I have to say, I thought I should take joy in listening to what he's about to say that I heard him say earlier as I run this clip, but I don't. I found I was empathetic, and I have new respect for him. I'll let it roll and just listen.
Stuck in traffic. I'm remembering right now. Wow, I'm wrong a lot. We don't like to say it. We don't like to admit it. We really don't like to correct it. But that is how you grow and you get to a better place. And it is such a precious commodity right now. I've been wrong. I've been wrong about political issues. I've been wrong about people. I've been wrong about myself. I've been wrong about my responsibilities. I've been wrong about my opinions, my tastes, my choices. I've been wrong. And that's okay. Hopefully you learn. Hopefully when you're wrong, you get to a better place if you do the work, unless you stubbornly hold on. And that's where so much of us are stuck. It's not just being wrong, it's refusing to learn what's right. I've been wrong. Have you been wrong? If you say no, you're wrong.
I've been wrong. I was wrong about Donald Trump. Yeah. I mean, I was right, but wrong. Trump 1.0, it was different. I wasn't entirely right, and I was wrong about some things, and I'm still wrong about some things now sometimes. It's true. I think nobody's perfect. We don't get it all right. And how can you be right about what other people do all the time? You can't be, because they do their own thing. And Donald Trump's doing some really bad things. Again, whatever happens tomorrow, if it's bad, and I think it's going to be, because I don't think Donald Trump actually wants a deal. I don't think he ever wanted a deal. I don't think he's been bargaining in good faith. I think he is trying to screw up our country. He's trying to destabilize everything up here. He's part of a concerted effort to do that. And it's complex, it's multi-layered. And there are people in Canada right now helping him. People among us, I suspect. No, I know. So I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Wow. Yeah. That's maybe why Donald Trump needs a distraction, because some people are calling him out and starting to clue in, right? Like the whole Epstein thing. He doesn't want us talking about that. Wouldn't Canada being completely destabilized, or maybe being portrayed as some giant threat to the United States, justifying some sort of an intervention, wouldn't that be a great distraction for him, but maybe not so much for us? So that we stop talking about Epstein and other things. Well, that's the story that just won't go away. And I'll leave you tonight again with Maverick and the News Brothers and that new song, Oops, Nothing to See Here. But I'll have more to show you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
They both look clean, but the guest list redacted, if you know what I mean. No files exist, just a little twist, nothing to see here. Move along, folks, the truth's in the vault with the dirty jokes. No names released, justice deceased to protect the victims. And Donald Trump, shh, don't say the name, you'll get dumped. They dance with the girls too young to vote, a private jet and a suicide note. One's in a grave, the other still tweets. The truth took a dive 6,000 feet. The cameras broke, that's not a joke. The guards were napping, the logs were gone, and everyone smiled like nothing's wrong. Nobody talks, just shadow walks. National security took the stage while justice quietly disengaged. We can't release the names to protect the victims. And also Donald Trump. Coincidence? Just dumb luck. Right? Another sealed file. That crocodile smile. We did our best, says the DOJ, while the truth just fades away. Another new spin. No one will win except the rich guys with gold ID cards and closets full of secrets behind steel bars. Just a little glitch, a billionaire's privilege. That's the sound of the case closed.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.